Welcome, YouTubers, to an amazing show tonight as Science Bob is back with Science Bob and Friends, and we are in for a real treat tonight. The chat room, honestly, guys, too packed for me to give a big rundown, so I apologize to you guys. You know I love you. I'm going to give you guys shout-outs when I type them into the show, but you know what? We are in for one hell of a treat tonight. Our special guest tonight, the one, the only, the legendary Richard Dolan, and he is, in my opinion, at the top of his game right now. At the top of his game. You know, there's a lot of researchers out there who have really, really come forward over the last couple years. But you know what? The best always stay consistent. And as we continue to try and deliver our best to you guys on a nightly basis, this is what we're doing. We're bringing you Richard Dolan with Science Bob on Science Bob and Friends. We are in for one hell of a night tonight. We're going to get into UFOs. We're going to get into aliens, disclosure. We're going to get into this weird story out of Israel with Hume. Richard has a brand new book coming out. We're going to detail that heavily tonight because it is important. I think we are getting all of these little leaks that we are getting right now are absolutely incredible. And they all add up to something. What that is, we do not know at this time. That's what's weird, everyone. We don't know where it's going. But you know what? When you have been doing this for 25, 30 years like Richard has, and you have been, in those inside meetings, those private conversations, those private letters, those private memos, you got a lot to say, and even more that you cannot say. Wouldn't you agree with that, Science Bob?
Oh, yeah. Look, you know that I had a long history within the intelligence community, and you get to go into a lot of meetings. And you leave them, and you leave what you know at the door because that's the way it works. And Richard he has to talk to sources all the time. And the thing that I have observed while Richard and I have become friends and involved with each other on Richard Dolan Forum and all those places is that Richard is trustworthy. He has a lot of people that trust him with stuff.
Well, Rich, are you blushing yet?
I'm listening. That's very nice of both of you to say those wonderful things. I feel very lucky. I love what I study. I love what I do. I get to work in one of the most fascinating areas of the world, studying UFOs, which, yeah, this is a subject that's exploding right now, so that makes it even more interesting. And in terms of sources, excuse me, I don't have a lot of sources. I have a few that I've had close conversations with over the years, and it is very important that you always have to strike a balance between getting information out to the world, but I also I've just never wanted to throw anyone under the bus, and if someone trusts me with something that's important, I have to maintain integrity and respect that. So on occasion that's put me in a position that I just don't like. There's people I would love to out right now in terms of, say, the Eric Davis, Thomas Wilson notes, which would make my life easier, but I'm not going to do it. But all of that's small potatoes. I just love the UFO field. I love many of the people in it, and it's been a great ride.
More importantly, when are you getting that Canadian citizenship?
Oh, wow, what a great question. Well, I have a Canadian wife who's got her U.S. residency, so I should return the favor. I don't know how easy it is.
Well, Stanton did it, though. Stanton did it. Married a good Canadian kid.
He married a Canadian lady and moved to New Brunswick, so that was his thing. Yeah, I'll talk to Tracy. We'll see. She likes the warmer weather. That's our thing.
I don't blame you. You.
But I love my Canada.
Well, we could use you. Yeah, I mean, we stole Stanton, so we're going to steal you next. That is the plan.
We'll see.
Well, I just want this damn COVID to be. I want this damn COVID to be over because there are 4 different places in British Columbia I need to go and spend time, and one of them is with Dave Scott, my best friend, ham radio buddy. Immigrated to Canada, married a woman, immigrated to Canada, and he's in Vancouver. And I miss that guy a lot, and I want to go see him. I haven't seen him in a decade. It's time. I'm ready for the damn border to open.
This is going to be a great show, guys. We've already got 72 live, and we haven't even fired it up yet. and numbers are going up. I want to remind everybody that a great way to support what we do is hit that thumbs up. More importantly, hit that subscribe button. We are just almost 400 away from 10,000 subscribers. That's what we're aiming for. Super Chat is open, and do a little shopping at the SOR Vault. Here we go, everyone. Actually, sorry, we got 30 seconds. I jumped the gun. I'm so excited, I jumped the gun. So if you want to go get T-shirts, support this show, sweaters, hoodies, whatever you want, go do a little shopping. Go to facebook.com/the SOR Vault. We got it all there. And maybe we got to make a Science Bob T-shirt. We got to make a Merle T-shirt. Maybe we should make a Science Bob T-shirt too. And we're going to get this going here in about 5 seconds. So everybody sit tight. We're in for one hell of a ride tonight. Here we go. Of Central British Columbia to you listening around the world, this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. My name is Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show and our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. If you want to take a listen to our archives, they are free for you at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Tonight's show is brought to you by Chive Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by visiting Chive Charities today. You can find them on our website. It's time once again to look into the scientific side of the woo with our resident Spaced Out Radio scientist, Bob McGwier. Each month, Science Bob brings a guest in with a scientific or research background to talk about all of the practical sides to the high strangeness that surrounds us. Tonight, we are proud to be joined by one of the most familiar faces in ufology for the last 3 decades. Richard Dolan is one of the world's leading researchers, writers, and authors on the subject of UFOs, and believes that they constitute the greatest mystery in humankind. He is the author of multiple books on the subject, and tonight we are going to look towards the side of disclosure, ET contact, and Richard's new book, That's Out. Then at the bottom of hour number 3, I will bring you the SOR Newswire, brought to you by Paranoia Magazine. Science Bob McGwier, always a pleasure to have you on Spaced Out Radio, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing really well, Dave. I'm ready to end this COVID isolation, but as long as we get to talk to fun people on here and listen to good guests and learn a few things, it's always fun to be on.
I got to tell you, I'm a little upset coming into the tonight's show because there is a massive solar storm, a solar flare happening right now. The northern lights are supposed to be dancing over my house right now, and it's cloudy. It's never cloudy here, but of course, when the northern lights decide to show up and put on a show, it's cloudy.
Well, I got to tell you, Dave, the recent predictions by the solar scientists are all changing dramatically, and I think we're going to have a massive sunspot cycle, so that we're going to get sunspot numbers 200. You're going to see lots of northern lights in the next 11 years.
I hope so. I hope so. They're absolutely gorgeous. And Bob, I'm going to give you the honors of introducing one of the top guests we've ever had on this show, Mr. Richard Dolan.
Richard, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey guys, Bob, Dave, thank you for having me on. It's a lot of fun.
Okay, so everyone knows that Richard Dolan blew open the doors into ufology when he wrote his UFOs and the National Security States, Volume 1, and then followed it up with Volume 2. And then he's done After Disclosure and other books with people like Brian Zabel co-authoring books with him. Richard's really been a star in ufology. And recently, Richard has begun studying a different part of the UFO field. Alien visitation and other things like that. And Richard decided to write a book on the alien agenda and give us his speculative analysis of what all this is about. Richard, look, tell us a little bit about. I know one of your inspirations for doing this book in this field was a historian named Colleen Clements. But tell us why the big change from national security state into the new area.
Sure. Yes, I'm glad you mentioned my old late friend Colleen. We can talk about her a little bit. But really, the origin of this book was simply my attempt to ask a different set of questions of the UFO field. So when I started this research many years ago, I was very focused on just trying to put together a reliable historical narrative of like what happened and then what happened and then what happened, and to try to analyze that as accurately as I could. What I've tried to do in this case is simply to look at the most difficult element of this phenomenon, which is that of contact. It's kind of where the rubber meets the road, and I didn't like the fact that after all these years had gone by, I didn't really have, in my mind, a super clear idea of what I really thought was the game plan and what was going on the ground. So were there grays? Were there other types of aliens? Were there these types, that type? And I wanted to know for myself, like what I actually thought. And I realized I can't know these things for sure, but what I can do is to look at the best evidence that I think is out there, that I consider to be the most reliable, and then to try to make sense out of it, which is really what I try to do with my other books. So, the subject of alien contact is a lot more difficult for a lot of reasons. I mean, partly the evidence itself, it's not like it isn't happening. I firmly believe that it is, but it can be very difficult to know what's reliable information and what isn't. And I can't even pretend in this book that like everything that I've written in there is exactly correct. I just don't know that. But all I can say is I tried my best. I wrote this book for myself, first and foremost. I was the main audience for this book. And it was my attempt to answer the question, who's here? What do they want? What are their agendas? And that's really what it is.
Well, that sounds really, really good there, Richard. I mean, I feel like every time I see either written art or written science or written philosophy or written history, the very best books to me are always written because the person writing it was not going through a procedure, but was honoring a passion, a thing that drove them to this place that they couldn't not go. And I just feel that's why you went there.
If I wanted to write a book that would be really topical, I would have written a different book. I wouldn't have written this book. I could have written a book on the current issues of disclosure. I mean, that's absolutely hot topic. I could have written a book dealing with the Tic Tac or TTSA or all of that. And I opted to do this because this was what was interesting to me.
Dave?
Richard, as someone who has seen this field change and morph over the last 30 years, from when you started to what it is today, how has the game changed, number one? But number two, do you like ufology today, the way it is?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I've been doing this for, I guess, 26 years. And I've been known for about 20 years. But yeah, I mean, I remember doing this in the mid-90s and following the field. No one knew me, but I was following them. The biggest change, of course, is the explosion of the web, which has affected everything, and it's definitely affected ufology. I remember when I wrote my first book, I got some criticisms from some of the old guard because I was using the web as a source of information, and I just thought, wow. So we've come a long way. The thing about with ufology, like when I look at it historically from the 70s and 80s and 90s, it was very much like an old boys club. It was a cliquey sort of a small group of people. And back then, before you had websites, you had, a couple of journals, the MUFON Journal and a few others, and they had limited circulation. They had editorial policies. If someone wanted to contribute to the field, it was a lot more difficult. in that era. And then what we discovered, of course, with the web is like everything's exploded and everyone can jump in. And that's made the field much more interesting by far. It's brought in a number of people that I think, are reputable and disreputable. So it's made it very difficult. And it's definitely turned the field into even more of a circus in a lot of ways than it ever was before. So do I like ufology? On certain days of the week, I don't. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. Like, I love the subject. I'm absolutely fascinated by the subject of UFOs and extraterrestrials or other beings, whatever they are, that are here and how they're affecting our world. I think it's incredibly important. I've made some amazing friends in this field, people that I will love and respect until the end of my life. But no, ufology really is a mess in a lot of ways, and it's a difficult field to enjoy in some ways. I have to say that, because it's just so polarized in a number of ways. And I mean, it's just one reason why I try like really hard not to engage in too many arguments and fights with other people, but sometimes it's avoidable.
Okay. I'll tell you, Richard, I agree with you, Richard, that it's just counterproductive to get in these shooting matches on Twitter. It's just a useless thing. Dave, I'm sorry I interrupted.
Oh, no, I was going to say pretty much the same thing as you, Richard. I mean, so many people get sucked down that rabbit hole of information versus disinformation. How do you, as someone who is an esteemed person, respected in this field, kind of stay away from that daily drama of things like UFO Twitter or the battles on whether, there's going to be disclosure or not? How do you do that?
Well, you have to make a decision not to do it. It's as simple as that. Like I have social media, but as anyone who's been paying attention to me probably realizes, like, I don't engage in social media the way that I used to in years past, because that's a great way for me to lose my mind. And I can't, like, the thing is, I can't allow myself to respond to new information that comes all the time, because there's always something that just wants me to engage in outrage. I remember about a year ago, I was at an event in, where the hell was I? I think I was in, it was the UFO Congress, so near Phoenix. And I'm walking, and Jimmy Church was there, and I mean, Jimmy's my friend, and he grabbed me, and he said, "Richard, what's your response to the fact that Luis Elizondo is being denied as a representative of ATIP?" Like, there was this thing that just blew up at the time. I remember this, and I hadn't heard it before, and I knew there's something was wrong with this. And there was something wrong with that, it turned out. But like, the thing is, anytime there's something new, I try not to have a reaction right away. I try to wait. And sometimes that causes people to be frustrated with me because they want me to jump in on some new statement that comes around the bend. And for me, the most important thing is to wait, reserve judgment, and then to slowly form an opinion. Like, it's just a tough thing, because in this field, there's just so much stuff that gets stirred around, and I don't want to have to react to every single thing that comes in front of me every single day. It's a recipe for just losing my mind. So I try to wait, and then make a decision. And that's the historian in me. Like, that's the training. Historians aren't usually comfortable writing about things that are contemporary, because it takes time to have perspective. I don't have that luxury anymore. I've actually thrown myself into putting together my third volume of UFOs in a National Security State, which is underway, and that's totally contemporary. So I'll have to just gut it out and write about contemporary history. But my instinct is always to wait, and my instinct is to reserve judgment. We live in a time where, whether it's UFOs or beyond UFOs, people don't want to wait until they make judgments. They just jump in, and we're getting more and more polarized. not just about politics, but about life in general, it seems to me. And I just think it's a dangerous path. So what I want to do is wait, be careful, and form an opinion after I've really thought things through.
Well, let's go just I want to call it slightly controversial, because you have fairly strongly held views about the context in which, let's say, the fourth stage of mankind is happening. But so I want you to give our audience that context, because you express it very well, and you have this perspective, and so that is the context in which this book is written. So give us that, if you would, please.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
And thanks for bringing me back onto track here. I was getting a little off. Yes, it's true. So last June, I did 2 online lectures, and one lecture was on the alien agendas, as I call it, plural, and one was on what I call the 4th stage of humanity. And when I wrote this book on the alien agendas, I did incorporate a lot of my ideas from the other lecture into this. So basically, this idea of a 4th stage of humanity is something that's really gotten a hold over me, and I think it's right. When I look over human history, I see 3 prior stages of how human beings have ever lived. Yes, we've had a lot of different societies, we've had different civilizations, but in my view, we've really only had 3 fundamental forms of existence ever. And there's been variations on those themes. So the main one for hundreds of thousands of years was we lived as hunters and gatherers in very small groups with a very small population, low population density. We were very intimate with nature and all of that. That's how human beings lived. Probably now for up to 300,000 years, which is the latest estimate of the length of the existence of our species, Homo sapiens. And then about 15 to 10,000 years ago, we went through a transition. And that was what we call the agricultural revolution. That's when human beings settled down. We grew plants. We gathered animals and started breeding animals and domesticating them. That's the birth of cities. That's the birth of writing. That's the birth of the wheel. That's the birth of metallurgy and all types of technologies. That gives you every ancient society, including the Roman Empire and everything else. That's the agricultural revolution. And that is really what created human civilization as we understand it. And then we transformed again, roughly a couple of hundred years ago, when we developed the scientific revolution and the industrial revolution. That created a completely new and different and fundamentally different form of human society based on science, giving a completely different worldview, a different cosmology, different capabilities. It gave us the railroad, it gave us the car, it gave us the airplane, it gave us radio, it gave us TV, it gave us computers. I mean, just a world utterly unlike anything that existed prior to that. So that's the 3rd stage of humanity. And now what I'm seeing is that we are fast moving into a 4th stage. And I really don't know what to call it. Sometimes I call it the transhumanist stage, but I don't really think that fully covers it either, because it's more than just biological transformations, which it will include, but it includes, you think about the technologies that are coalescing right now. So everyone knows about the future of strong artificial intelligence and nanotechnology and bioengineering, sure. But then you've got 5G, you've got smart devices, you've got the ability of 5G and smart devices to monitor every single person and their activity for the rest of their life. So goodbye privacy. You have also in this world, we're being ideologically bludgeoned now. I mean, we can all see this happening through centralization of big tech in with legacy media that is now combining for a form of propaganda unlike anything that I've ever experienced in my lifetime or anyone else listening has. And what we're seeing really is a world that's moving toward emulating China in what, they've got their social credit system of what they call trustworthiness. And you can easily see that we're maybe a decade behind them. So we're moving toward a kind of genius totalitarian global system by which people are really going to be digitized, commodified, controlled in every way that I can imagine. And when I look at all of that, that's a fundamentally different form of human existence than anything that's ever existed before. And I think it's going to change human psychology, and I think it's going to change human physiology, which is already changing, actually, and a creation of a totally different culture, one of, I think, great conformity, one based on fear as well, something that I don't think that I'm going to like, and I think most people listening aren't going to like, but I think it's going to happen. And the one thing that it will do, I mean, it will weaken individuals. We'll probably just all be living virtual reality games like Ready Player One, as far as I can see. But what it will do is it will give the ruling establishment of our world tremendous power, tremendous power. So in terms of their ability to control the technologies that I've just been talking about, it will be like a leap. This is not an incremental change that I'm talking about. This is a leap, just like from hunting and gathering to agriculture, just like from agriculture to the industrial scientific revolution. Those were leaps. This is another leap, and it's going to be orders of magnitude beyond what we currently do. And my speculation is that it might actually be just enough when we're through this transformation to put us on a level where we will be able to deal with these other beings in a way very much unlike what we can do now. So if you look at post-singularity artificial intelligence just as one thing, and then post-quantum computing and whatever we have, in 50 to 100 years, we're going to have a tremendous amount of power. You think about military capabilities, weaponry. We're already in a drone warfare revolution right now. The nation of Turkey has shown that. So we're looking at capabilities that are going to be vastly beyond, orders of magnitude beyond what they are now. And so for the people running our civilization, what I call the masters of our universe, the Bilderberg people, the World Economic Forum people, and so forth, they're going to have a lot of power at their disposal. And so it's really going to transform our world in ways that, I can't see the details. I can just see the contours, the outlines, but the outlines are pretty clear.
So Dave, take us to break.
Well, we have about 90 seconds. Richard, where is this hidden information? You're saying that you know the contours of everything, but the full details, the full grasp and measures of what is truly happening with the phenomena and the way humans are advancing. Does anybody know that answer yet?
Well, probably some people do. Just to tie this in with the UFO phenomenon before we go to break, what I argue in this book, The Alien Agendas, is that there's a definite reason why they are here in force in great numbers now. And that is because they are well aware that we are going through this transformation. We've, I think, been subject to a low-level monitoring operation for thousands of years, but low level. But starting in the 20th century, we see dramatic changes in the quantity of really good quality UFO sightings. And I think there's no accident for that. I think that they are aware we're about to leap into their world.
Well, that's amazing. So is this all defined by a path that is written, as we got about 45 seconds?
Good question. I mean, I personally think the answer is very possibly yes, that societies follow, in a lot of ways, societies follow the technologies that are available at the time. And we have created technologies that, unfortunately, in my view, allow governments to control people to a degree that is unimaginable to me. And because they have that ability to control, they're utilizing it. So I think we're kind of being corralled, and this transformation is just happening. And I'd like to know of a way to buck it, to fight it, but I haven't figured that one out yet.
All right, guys, I'm going to get you to hold on right there because we're going to go to break at the bottom of the hour. Science Bob and Friends with special guest, the legendary Richard Dolan. Tonight on Spaced Out Radio, we continue with UFO talk all night long on Science Bob and Friends. All right, gentlemen, we're clear.
Good. Okay, that was the perfect end to the half hour, and I've heard you do this now 3 times, and I knew that was the exact words you were going to use, and you've really got it down.
Which words?
The ones where you're telling about your view of the coming version of humanity that's about to happen. You do it well. You're clearly passionate about it, and that's important context for where we're going next.
Yeah. I wish I could be more optimistic about it, to be perfectly honest.
No, so I'm going to talk. I'm going to talk to you about, just on the other side of the break. I'm going to talk to you about Hoffman and his view of consciousness, and why I believe the technologies I see are going to do that. And then we're going to go into the next part of the book.
I'm not familiar with him, so that'll be great. I'll enjoy learning.
I believe we're about to be manipulated by our own inner nature.
Not sure what you mean by that, but I'll want to know.
Yep.
All right, good. I blew through my tea, I see.
Well, you got time?
No. Well, how much of a break do we have here?
We got about 4.5 minutes. You got time.
Oh, really? Let me just go get a glass of water.
Yeah.
And I will be right back.
All right, Richard.
Okay.
You got snow, Dave?
No, it's been raining. It's cloudy, blocking the northern lights. I'm pissed off. But well, that's okay.
I would be too. But I really believe, given what I've seen in the last 2 weeks coming from the solar scientists, we're going to have a ton of aurora in the next 8 or 9 years.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, either way, it blocks my view for tonight. Later on, it's supposed to clear up a little bit, so I'm hoping the show is continuing once I sign off the air.
Yeah, if we get a lot of solar activity, so you see a lot of sunspots and prominences, I'm going to live stream the view from my telescope somewhat regularly. Not every day, but somewhat regularly.
How's your snow science, Bob? How's that snowblower doing?
Oh, the snowblower is so lonely. I'm trying to sell it.
Snowblower? You're in Alabama. What the hell?
Exactly. I had a snowblower in Virginia because I lived in the mountains, but I have it and I don't need it.
No, you don't need a snowblower where you live. Sell it to me.
I'm happy to sell it to you. It's an electric start. I'm serious.
You might get it for an autograph, Rich.
Yeah, sure. Hey, you said we're actually streaming on YouTube right now, so people can hear this?
Yes.
All right, good.
Yeah.
Greetings to the listeners.
Yeah.
I'm going to pass on that snowblower. I don't think I could afford it. I'm guessing you have a grade A snowblower there, Bob. Even though you don't need it.
I have a grade A snowblower. It's electric start. The thing is awesome.
See, I knew it. I've never owned one. I have this thing called a shovel.
Oh, yeah, well, you stay in better shape.
They are wondrous. I love my snowblower. You know,
do you even get snow in BC though?
Yeah, but I'm halfway up the province. I'm almost like, usually at this point I got about 2-3 feet of snow, and we're in this unseasonably warm melt right now. Now down by Vancouver, you don't. The Vancouver Island, you don't. But where I am, go back 20 years.
Where are you exactly?
I'm in okay. You know where Kamloops is?
Yes.
Okay,
I saw it on a map.
I'm 2 hours north of Kamloops.
Oh, you're way the hell up there.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. BC is just a beautiful, beautiful part of the world.
It's kind of nice.
What an amazing place.
All right, guys, we got a minute here.
Goody. So I got my water. Throat feels a little raspy. Not sure why. So Hoffman, you said, Bob?
Yep. I'm about to jump right into it with you.
I don't know who this is, so good.
All right, gentlemen, we've got about 45 seconds here, and then we'll kick things off. If you're new to our chat room and new to this show, we thank you for tuning us on in, and we want to say you could do us a favor. We're very close to 10,000 subscribers, so if you're brand new, hit that subscribe button. We are here every Monday through Friday night 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. Yeah, we don't take nights off here. We just run with it because we're silly that way. Big thank you for the super chats tonight for Justin, Jenny, G. West, DB Cooper, Inzane, Cat Chaser, Steam Train Mark, and Human Carl. We really do appreciate the love and support. Here we go, everyone, with the second half hour. Stay tuned. Second half hour of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for tuning us on in tonight. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears. I want to remind you that if you missed portions of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. Science Bob and Friends is a time where we step away from the woo and get to the who, what, where, when, and why, but most importantly, how with Science Bob and Friends with Bob McGwier and our special guest tonight, the legendary researcher in ufology, Richard Dolan. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Good to be here, Dave. Richard, let's jump into some science that's going on now. Consciousness has, of course, reared its head, if you'll let me use that, in ufology. And there is a researcher in cognitive sciences out in California named Daniel Hoffman. And Daniel Hoffman and his peers have been trying to write down mathematical models of consciousness in action, and they've done something completely startling. They have written down what is a usable model for consciousness activity, where you have these conscious agents, and they work with each other, and they've cast this as a game, this game of life, if you will, and game theory applies to this game of life. And here's what they've discovered, that those entities or beings that have a conscious sensors that show them actual reality are both genetically and in evolutionary ways harmed by being able to see actual reality, that our perception and our sensors in our bodies show us an illusion of reality, and the illusion is there to optimize our chances of winning the game of reality. So as this science becomes stronger and stronger, better understood, and how it actually all works, this provides a perfect opportunity for governments to utilize this predisposition inside human beings to rig the game, if you will, so that they believe their optimal trajectory is to live under control. That sounds a little bit frightening, that's kind of a fallout of a bad application of otherwise good science.
Can I ask you if I want to see if I've understood what you just said? Because it sounds actually a lot like what philosophers have been saying for the last couple of hundred years since Immanuel Kant. In other words, that our perceptions of reality are not the same as reality itself.
That's correct.
All right. So I mean, that's an old idea. And
it is, but in the scientific approach to dealing with consciousness, they have proven a mathematical theorem that says we are disadvantaged when we see actual reality, that what our sensors want to give us is something that optimizes our ability to win the game of life, and thus we live in an illusion.
I have a hard time making sense out of that, because we have to live in reality. Objective reality exists whether we recognize it or not. And to the extent that we're disconnected from that, it seems to me that's a disadvantage for us as a species. Like, you want to be able to perceive things accurately. Now, we all know that every single moment, like, we're getting all these inputs that our brain doesn't actually process because it's irrelevant information. So the brain winnows out all of these different things just so what it needs. So our very act of perception is we're selecting the reality that we're seeing, but that doesn't mean that we're seeing illusion per se. It just means that we're blocking out the things that we perceive as irrelevant. I'm not really sure if, we know that that is the case. So what this model you're talking about, I'm going to honestly say, doesn't make sense to me, that we're disadvantaged. It's definitely true, in my opinion, that we do not perceive full reality. Like, there's no way. Years ago, like, you look at all animals, all creatures that have brains, and we can recognize that they perceive reality different than we do. We can understand, I think, more than a dog. To expect a dog to know where, like, when you pull your car out of the driveway, where you're going, your dog doesn't know where you go. So because it's a dog, and that's how they are. We operate at a higher level, but we have to assume that there are beings that operate on much higher levels, even beyond us. So there are ways of understanding reality that we're never going to get just by virtue of the way our brains are organized. But this idea that you're saying, and maybe I'm just not getting it, probably the case, but I have a hard time seeing how we are disadvantaged when we perceive actual reality.
Yep. So I'm kind of trying to write a popularization of that now, and I will do it so that we can interact further, because I think it augments your earlier arguments. Well, let's go to a slightly different place. One of the most interesting parts of this book, Richard, was you're educating me, and then me able to go look at your references, etc., to go back and you make the argument that we now have really good evidence that somebody tinkered with us about 40,000 years ago.
Maybe. Yeah, so let's talk about that. This was the trickiest part of the book for me to write about, because I'm not a geneticist. It's not my expertise, even remotely. And I felt a little uneasy, to be honest, jumping into a discipline where I just know, like, it's not even geneticists. Like, there's a bunch of prehistorians out there, people who are experts on Neanderthals and experts on early Homo sapiens. And, I could just imagine them wanting to rip what I say to pieces. Nevertheless, I wrote this. And what we're talking about here is that we have a particular gene. It's known as a microencephalin gene. And it has to do with brain growth and development. And their genes have what are known as alleles or alleles. That's A-L-L-E-L-E. Those are, and again, this is not my expertise, but I know that genes have these things. And what the geneticists have determined is that the microencephalin gene has a particular allele. It's called the D allele, which they know somehow is a recent addition to us. And they've got it, their estimate is that it's roughly 40,000 years ago is when we got it. That estimate is essentially because they split the difference between the high end and the low end. So it could be as a little more than 60,000 years ago, and it could be as little as less than 20,000 years ago. That we got this gene through interbreeding. And now this is considered an important addition to this gene because it has to do with brain growth and development. And if you study human prehistory, you know that what's called the creative explosion in humanity happened a little more than 40,000 years ago. So if you compare our inventiveness prior to that and then after that, there's no comparison. There's cave art, of course, which starting a little more than 40,000 years ago just explodes with incredible creativity and works of genius compared with what had existed a couple of thousand years earlier. And then the same in tool making. You start seeing a lot of inventiveness and creation. And so I had a friend who died about 10 years ago. Her name was Professor Colleen Clements. She taught at the University of Rochester and the Rochester Institute of Technology. She and I were good buddies. We had a third friend. We used to hang out all the time. And she wrote a couple of books that dealt with this. This was an interest of hers. And she talked with me about it. I wasn't really deeply engaged in it. But I have her books, and for reasons that I don't even know fully, I decided to break open her book earlier this year because of this idea. It had never gone away from me. And so what I wanted to do this year was, because when she wrote her book in 2008, we had pretty much mapped the human genome, but the Neanderthal genome was partially mapped. And so obviously, if you've got geneticists saying that this gene came from interbreeding, the obvious candidate are Neanderthals. And my friend Colleen looked into this, and the fact was there was no evidence of this genetic material with the Neanderthals. So that was 2008. So in 2020, I thought, well, let's look into this. And I was able to research it and to find out, have scientists found this particular allele and gene in the Neanderthals? And to my surprise, actually, I discovered they had not. And they were looking and looking. It's not for a lack of trying. There have been some very detailed studies on this, and I cite those in my book. And that was a surprising thing. So what you find is that these geneticists and these scientists were quite disappointed because they had assumed that we had gotten this from Neanderthals, and damned if they can find it. They can't find it. It's not, it doesn't seem to be there. Now, there's a possibility that in 10 years, 20 years, maybe like a Hail Mary pass at the end of a game, they'll find it. And we'll be like, okay, great, we got this from the Neanderthals. But the fact is, it doesn't look like it. And there's another early group that existed at the time, which was very closely related to Neanderthals, called the Denisovans. And they also don't seem to have this gene. So the question is, who's the daddy? Like, if this did come through interbreeding, and if it didn't come from the Neanderthals and it didn't come from the Denisovans, you're really running out of candidates of, human groups that existed. There were the little hobbit people who lived in Indonesia, but I don't think anyone's considering them either. And the fact is that the geneticists who've studied the Denisovan and the Neanderthal genes, they don't seem to be optimistic at this point. I've read some of the papers, and they're like, yeah, it doesn't look like it's going to be there. So it's just like a big question mark. And, for someone who studies UFOs, for someone who wonders, have we been modified? I think a lot of people do wonder. When you look at human development in general, we're really the only species on the planet that follows such a bizarre, rapid evolution. Like, there really aren't any other species that evolve as quickly as human beings do.
I want to jump in and give you technological underpinnings that I personally can see, and probably most others will realize once I tell you how we will be able to do what you're talking about in about 10 years.
Aha, yes, okay. This is interesting.
Okay. All right, so the two women won the Nobel Prize in medicine and biology for their invention and now technological perfection of CRISPR-Cas9 that can go in and do surgery on our genetic code and put whatever they want into it. That's number one. Number two, you need to simulate what will happen to a genome before you go to do these experiments. Otherwise, you'll be here for eternity trying to figure out which thing to modify. So, but if you're able to simulate the genome and its action as you change it, you'll be able to do this more rapidly. And guess what's coming that'll do it? Large quantum computers. And then you want to be able to get a gestalt on what's going on with this genome. And so Elon Musk Neuralink or telepathic connection or whatever to the running simulation will allow you to see quickly through some kind of visualization and the simulation, you'll be able to see quickly what's going on. So right. I just think we're like 10 years away from the technology of being able to do that ourselves. And I think everyone believes that we're going to manipulate our genome to make super. So France today announced that they were going to experiment on volunteers to turn them into super soldiers. They announced it in the newspaper.
Wow.
So anyway, I just thought it was interesting. Dave, jump in.
Well, when you speak super soldiers, I mean, that opens up a whole nother can of worms in this entire UFO mystery, does it not?
Well, explain a little more. I mean,
Well,
what are you thinking specifically?
there's a lot of people out there, you know, granted it goes down the woo side of everything, but there's a lot of people out there who claim that there's already super soldiers that have been built or genetically modified.
Right, that's true. I've met a couple of those guys myself, and I really never knew what to think about them, to be honest with you. So I don't know. It's possible. I don't know what the black budget world has done in terms of genetics. I mean, I just have no idea how advanced they actually are. I mean, some people think they might be incredibly advanced, and my sense of the classified world is that there's probably great levels of advancement in some areas and maybe not as much in others. I just don't know. But I think it's definitely true that we're going to be moving very rapidly, I mean, with CRISPR, you know, as Bob was saying, to substantial genetic modifications of the human being. You know, I've often felt that we're going to probably move towards some kind of biologically based caste system. I mean, we're already sort of there in our world as it is now, but I think it will be much more so. And personally, I don't know how much value super soldiers are actually going to be in the future anyway. When you're looking at, you know, incredibly mechanized drones, for example, super soldiers not going to do much good against a drone that's got them targeted and blows them up from afar. You know, but I do think we're looking toward a future of a lot of genetic engineering. And yeah, to have tweaked, you know, human beings, say roughly 45,000 years ago, some species that could have visited here looking at us as we existed at the time, thinking close but not quite there. Let's just do a little bit of a tweak and see what happens. And, you know, very, very delicately adding this allele to this gene and then watching it spread through positive selection, which is really what appears to have happened.
Okay, before we move on into some of the really interesting examples of who might be visiting, you have a really good discussion about, are we being monitored or are we being controlled? Right. And I think that's important to move into the who's visiting us before you address what's their motives.
Well, I think, I mean, I'm only giving my theory here. And my theory is only based on the information that I have looked at. I mean, there's probably more information that I haven't seen, but my sense is that we were monitored for a very long time, not really controlled, because there was really not much value in controlling us. We were just not that interesting. We were at a very low level of capability. We had no ability to deal with them in any substantial way. And what would be in it for them to kind of run our society back in the Middle Ages, like living in unheated castles? And I mean, it wouldn't really be all that much of a great thing for another species to infiltrate human society back then. It just seems to me it doesn't make sense. There are some interesting UFO cases from way back then and some interesting encounter cases that could be legitimate. But again, what I believe is that we got the whole neighborhood to watch us starting around our 20th century, when we started to develop very potent science and weaponry and capabilities, like all at once. And I think that's why they're here. So in terms of infiltration and control, this is a really important question. Like, if I were in the intelligence community, which I'm not, and if I were charged with counterintelligence and national security, and I knew about this subject, I would make damn sure that I would want to know, are we being infiltrated and controlled? Like, that would be important for me to know, because from the point of view of any alien that is looking at us, they would have to be thinking, this is a disruptive species. This is a violent species. This is a sadistic species that actually tortures their own people and does horrifically terrible things. Like, we're so concerned about what the aliens do to us, we forget just what we are. And we can be amazing, we can have saints, and we can have beautiful people, but we've got scary people who do terrifying things. And so any species that's watching us, realizing that we're developing tremendous power right now, and also considering my take on them is that they are probably intensely conservative societies at this point. This is what I believe. I can tell you why I think so, but this is what I think. So I think change and disruption are probably not something that they want to see, and we are change and disruption right now. Now, once we jump to our next full stage, we may become one just big giant anthill just like them, and maybe we won't be something that disturbs them. But right now we are unstable, and so they might very well want to get their assets in our society and control our development. I mean, I would, if I were them, that's what I would do. So if I were a counterintelligence officer on Earth charged with defending humanity, I'd be looking into that possibility.
Dave?
Well, we do provide probably the most entertaining reality TV for the aliens. I mean, let's just be honest here. They get a little bit of everything.
I think you're exactly right. Like, I used to laugh at those types of comments. You know, South Park did a whole thing on that, and like a lot of shows have done it, The Simpsons. But I think it's actually true. Like, I think that we are, I used to call us years ago the greatest show in the quadrant. And I think that's what we are. Like, we're going through this transformation now, and I think it's got to be intensely interesting. And sure, other civilizations have gone through it, but how often does it happen? I don't know if it happens every day. So we're going through it now, and there's uncertainty that's probably involved. Like, are we really going to destroy ourselves? Are we going to self-immolate, or are we going to go out into the rest of the universe and conquer the solar system and the local group? I mean, I don't know. Are they looking at us with some trepidation or some concern? They might be.
Well, the one thing that intrigues me is we got about a minute 45 left, Richard, is the fact that we're still in so much denial. With all the evidence out there, how can humanity be in such denial that these events are taking place?
Oh, God. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because this moves us into the last 3 years of our world here, when UFOs have kind of broken out into some form of public conversation. And I think that's a great thing. We're seeing a kind of partial disclosure, but we're seeing such a tepid, tame, lame, cautious version where, you know, let's call them the mainstream journalists are just not asking good questions. And so we're at this ridiculous, almost intellectually insulting point where the United States Navy has been able to say, yes, we encounter these UFOs or these UAP, but we don't know what they are. And to me, that's just the most ridiculous, non-credible position. It's something I could never, I was just talking about this on a stream that I did last night. I could never have predicted this 10 years ago when I wrote AD After Disclosure, that people would just accept that. But yet here we are. They're pretending that they don't know what these things are. And to me, that's just simply ridiculous.
It is a little ridiculous when you think about it because, you know, we're supposed to be smarter than this. You know, and if most of the population can look up into the stars and says, look, science has proven that it's pretty infinite up there. We don't know where the end is. That just maybe there is another life form or two out there that is more advanced than us that's maybe checking us out. The possibilities are endless. And Richard,
well, the evidence is right there. It's plain to see anyone bothering to look at it.
Absolutely. Richard Dolan is our special guest tonight on Science Bob and Friends, as I am joined by Science Bob McGwier, formerly of Virginia Tech University, now of Auburn, and checking things out on the scientific side of everything we go through. These two great gentlemen will be with us for hour number 2, UFOs, aliens, ET contact, Israel, whatever else we can throw in to Science Bob and the legendary Richard Dolan coming up next. All right, we're clear, guys.
All right.
Oh, that was a good hour, Richard.
Solid hour.
I'm going to have to check out this Hoffman and his theory, because I must be missing something.
I'll be right back, guys.
So let me explain to you what
Sure.
I'm writing a carefully done popular treatment of it. So I don't expect you you or anyone else to understand how to do the optimality of the game theoretic equations he writes down, or what a Markov random field is, or any of that stuff. That's not what is expected. But what I feel is needed is a treatment of it for the average person to get a gestalt.
Right. Well, your comment on CRISPR technology, that was right on point. And man, I should have just included some of that in my book. I didn't even think to, but it seems really obvious.
Second edition.
Yeah, yep, it could be. But I'd like to know more about the Hoffman idea. There's something that just didn't seem quite right to me about it, but I suspect I'm just missing something.
I think there are certain conditions he puts in there. Look, but it goes along with. There are a lot of weird things in math and science.
One thing that you got me thinking about, though, and I didn't really mention it, was, I mean, it seems to be that he's essentially saying that we of necessity live in a kind of illusory reality, like an illusion. Like
that's what he says. And he says we are evolutionarily harmed if we are covered up with reality.
That is what consciousness really does to us. So, like, I was just reading Eckhart Tolle earlier this year, and one thing he points out is that, like, you are not your thoughts. That's like his main thing. And so the thoughts that we have are, in his opinion, are actually harmful to us, but they also take us out of the genuine reality of being, right? And so, like, because we fill our head with all of these ideas and all of these concepts, these constructs of reality, that maybe this is what Hoffman might be saying, that this is essentially an illusion, in which I would agree with that, actually. We live in illusory thoughts in this illusory world, but the other side of me says, well, our brains actually are designed to do that. So there's got to be a good reason, and it is a good evolutionary reason, because it gives us a lot of power. Mm-hmm. But it does take us out of reality to some extent, right? Like when we're thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking, we're kind of spinning out into our head. And what we're not doing necessarily is like what a Zen master would say is, you're not being in the moment. You're not actually experiencing reality.
Yes.
So maybe that's what he's
You're not mindful.
About.
Yes.
Yeah, mindfulness. Yeah.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And what he's done is write down a mathematical model that you get falsifiable predictions out of, and in the end, irrespective of kind of the exact form, there's still this kind of game theoretic construct in which he's determined that there are two classes, and then one class is disadvantaged and the other class is advantaged. And so it's not really a fair game if those are the two players. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you mentioned it, actually. I wasn't trying to give you pushback. I didn't.
No.
Understand.
That's the way science is.
Yeah.
There is nothing more brutal than a bunch of scientists getting together and taking pot shots at each other. I'm used to it.
I bet. Good. Dave's back.
I'm back. No northern lights. It's terrible. Still cloudy.
So you're 2 hours north of Kamloops. That's even north of, like, Whistler, right?
Yes.
You're way north.
Yeah, I'm.
Way.
I would be 2.5 hours northeast of Whistler.
Okay. Yeah.
And one of the most brutal highways I've ever driven. The Pemberton Highway there.
North of there?
Oh, yeah.
I've never been north of Whistler. I think that's the most north in British Columbia I've ever been.
Yeah. Whistler's gorgeous. Gorgeous.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really nice.
Yeah, Pemberton is where a guy named Steve Istall lives. Has been working closely with why am I forgetting his name? David Paulides with a ton of Sasquatch activity in that area.
Yes.
Oh, it was really interesting.
Politis is so interesting to me.
Oh yeah, but in one of his recent last 2 or 3 videos, Richard went there. He went to Sasquatch and portals and dimensional travel and ET and alien kidnapping. He went all the way there.
You know, it happens to everyone at some point. There's a lost interview I did with David Politis from several years ago, and I don't think it exists anywhere. And it was a damn good interview. And I got him to go farther, I think, than he'd ever gone before. It was with KGRA, and I think it's lost. But yeah, I could tell like he was definitely open to ET, but he just he wasn't comfortable going public with it. And I didn't blame him. You know, everyone's got to fight their battles, and sometimes you don't want to fight too many at one time. But I consider his research very important.
Yeah,
because I think he's pointing out major anomalies that do tie in with a lot of the things that we're studying.
All right, gentlemen, hold on. We got 10 seconds here. Big thank you to Michael, Jules. We have Justin, Jenny, G. West, DB Cooper, Inzane, Cat Chaser, Steam Train Mark, and Human Carl for the super chats. Here we go.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight. We really do appreciate your listening support. I want to say thank you to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America and digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. Remember, you can check out all of our archives for free by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Palästhesia. Palästhesia is your password. Use it wisely, as the Clam sets a password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. We continue on with Science Bob and Friends. Bob McGwier joins us once a month to kind of step away from the woo and get into the who, what, where, when, and why, and how all of this weird, strange, paranormal, supernatural activity is going on. And tonight's special guest is the legendary Richard Dolan, who is joining us. And gentlemen, I got a special hello to both of you from a good friend, Lori Wagner, who is listening in tonight.
Oh.
And she has been texting
Hey, Lori.
me. Yeah, she's been texting me and saying, hello, make sure you say hi to the guys and Richard. So, yeah, big hi from Lori.
Lori
Tracy
told me that she was out on the beach and was seeing UFOs. So that's great.
Lori, good to hear from you. Hope you're doing great. Love you.
Yeah, me too.
She's wonderful.
All right,
let's jump back into it. So before you dive into possible agendas, you put out some evidence and a discussion of who is actually visiting, and along with evidence. And I think it's important for our audience for you to at least go through some of that. And I mean, just me personally, I'm going to tell you what, David Jacobs scares the crap out of me with his hubris. So just go through some of that evidence and the basis for the claims that we are being visited and the kinds of entities that are visiting and so forth. Some examples of that before we jump into why they're here.
Gladly. And by the way, David scares himself. He doesn't like the implications of his research either. Well, one of the first things that I did when I started looking at the different types of beings that people were encountering was I had to come to terms with the fact that a large number of those beings looked totally human. And this is jarring, you know, at least it was jarring to me for years. And it's not like I wasn't aware that there were all kinds of accounts of people encountering human-looking occupants of craft, but it occurred to me when I was really thinking honestly about it that I didn't really fully take those as seriously as I should have. And, you know, part of me might have thought in the back of my mind, well, maybe they were creating some kind of illusion, or who the hell knows. But when you read a case after case of people describing some of these beings looking completely human, like, I don't know what else you can conclude except that many of these operators are virtually indistinguishable from the rest of us, or they may have some variation. Sometimes that's been described. So that caused me to look into other forms of research where people were trying to quantify the different types of beings that we're seeing. So one recent example came from the organization known as FREE. That's the Foundation of Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Experiences. This Edgar Mitchell's group that he created way back then. And they did a kind of an online survey. And I had my problems with some of the methodology, but I mean, overall, I think that they got a lot of information in there from thousands of people who wrote to them and described their experiences. And one of the things that they concluded was that almost half of all the people who claimed to have been aboard a UFO or flying saucer, I think 45% of those encounters involved beings that looked human. So it was quite a large number. Now, there were more encounters that involved gray aliens if you combine the short and tall grays. But humans were a large group. And let me just go no further than the Travis Walton experience, where he described waking up on a table and there were non-humans above him, around him, and he was in a weakened state, and he tried to be aggressive with them, and they just walked out of the room. He goes into another part of the craft and encountered a perfectly human-looking being who led him to another area where there were other human-looking beings on this craft. And you have to ask yourself, if you accept what Travis said, and I don't see any reason to doubt him, you've got two types of beings on this one craft. And that's not the only example, not by any means. So one type of being that people are encountering look just like us. And the question that I ask myself is, how could that possibly be? Like, could I expect that there would be people who would evolve to look exactly like us on another planet? Now, there are reasons to think that there would be humanoid types of beings, with 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, ears, nose. Yes, because it's actually a really logical body plan, and there's a lot of reasons why you could expect it to happen elsewhere. But for them to look indistinguishable from us, that seemed like a stretch. And I still don't really have an easy way to explain it, other than my speculation about having ancient visitation. So if there were beings who were here 40,000 years ago, they could, at that time, have scooped up a few humans that existed there and just taken them with them and genetically modified them and done whatever they wanted. Or they could have taken them at any other subsequent time. They could have taken them 10,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago. And with enough genetic modification, you have those humans in with your society, they become just like the aliens, essentially. They might be in upper management there, for all I know. They might have some significant roles. But the fact is, they would have very little in common with us, except certain physiology and appearance. And I do think it's entirely possible that the human beings that people encounter on these craft are originally from here, but have been adapted, taken, adopted, and modified. And so they're working for the other team. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're against us, not necessarily at all. But I think that's, if I had to have one explanation for completely human-looking beings, that would be what I would say. I would say that they were us, they were taken, modified, and now they're in another society. Now, you've got other groups that people encounter as well, but only in the 20th century and beyond. So when you look at gray aliens, there are no examples that I have ever seen of humans encountering gray aliens prior to the 20th century. You've got the cave paintings in Australia of the Wagina, and they sure as hell do look like gray aliens, and those are thousands of years old. But that's the outlier. There are no other examples that I am aware of. So my assumption is that grays came here in the 20th century. And there are similarly no, let me say, for me, credible or detailed examples of human encounters with reptilian beings. Yes, there's some Sumerian, Mesopotamian artwork that may look like a reptilian being, but that doesn't cut it for me. So for me, when I'm looking at in terms of other types of beings, and this goes for the so-called mantid beings, the insect type beings, these are all recent. And my conclusion is that they have arrived recently, and they've arrived recently specifically because of what we're doing. So the question that I might ask is, what is the relationship between any long-term group that might have been here watching us and these guys? Because I don't think that they're the same. And I don't have an answer to that, but my speculation is that there might be problems, or there might be a covert level of opposition going on that we are not aware of, because it's in everyone's interest for us to be kept aside, kept apart from this. I think the secrecy is a really important element of what they're all about. We're dealing with secrecy not simply from our governments, which we are, but we're dealing with secrecy from these beings. And we need to ask ourselves why. Well, from a benevolent point of view, it's actually very easy to see why they would be secretive. You know, for them to announce themselves to us would be it could be a very damaging thing to us psychologically, in ways that they may not want to have to experience that. But also, let's say they're recent arrivals. Let's say they've, picked up their observation in our 20th century when we were in the midst of the First World War and then the Second World War, the rise of Hitler, the rise of Stalin, atomic showdown between the superpowers. Like, that's not a safe environment. So if you're an alien landing or coming to Earth, who actually do you talk to and announce yourself in the midst of this fractured, violent world? Like, that's not necessarily an easy thing to do, and you might not want to announce yourself openly. Now, if you're here for other purposes, if you're here because you're worried about these beings, these human beings, and you think of them as a potential threat down the road after they achieve fourth stage of humanity, you may want to control them. You may want to infiltrate them, and you damn sure don't want to let them know that you're here. So there's a variety of reasons why secrecy would be important from their point of view. And I explore a number of other reasons in my book, but I mean, I think those are some important ones right there. So you've got, it would be great to have a perfect scorecard of everyone who's here, because there's more than just these beings that I've talked about here. There's an intelligence that is operating on another level, maybe even beyond these guys. I listen to people like Eric Davis talk about it when, he's had experience over at the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. Davis and John Alexander is another one. They talk about a kind of pre-sentient intelligence that is just vastly beyond our capabilities. Now, I don't know if that's the same intelligence as these other beings or if it's something totally different. I suspect it's actually something different, but I don't know. But I guess what I am saying is I think that there's a variety of entities that are here. And one of the things that we really want to be able to understand is, what is their diplomacy? What is their interactivity with each other? And in addition to, what are their attitudes toward us? Like, we need to know all of these things. And I can only hope that there are some smart people, within the deep state, within the national security state, who are thinking intelligently about this, because if they're not, they need to.
Richard, I want to ask you, in regards to the history of it, the one thing this new wave of ufology has really, really dropped the ball on is the history of what's already happened. And
yes.
And what
Big time.
You go from Kenneth Arnold to Roswell to the San Augustine, which is never talked about in regards to the Roswell crash.
True.
You look at all of these events where we have these alleged craft, alleged bodies. There is a plethora of information out there, and yet today's ufologists and scientists who are coming out say, well, we know nothing. We know nothing of the sort. How can we believe that?
It's absurd. It sounds like you're reading my mind, Dave, because when you hear people talking about it these days, it's as if UFOs started in 2004 with the Tic Tac UFO. It's like nothing before then. It's ridiculous. I was just saying recently, there have been Tic Tac UFO sightings going back decades and decades and decades. I found one in the Canadian National Archives from 1936, Northwest Territories, middle of nowhere. And I think it's a damn good report. But you get military reports of Tic Tac UFOs in the 40s and in the 50s that, do all the things that we know about now, like instant acceleration from 0 to thousands of miles per hour and so forth. So this is a phenomenon that has been with us for a full human lifetime at the least, like with major national security concern. And you've got this fiction where the U.S. Navy is saying, yeah, we've actually encountered these UAPs, but we don't know what they are. And that's just not credible. And anyone with half a brain knows it's not credible. When they say, oh, well, maybe it's the Russians, maybe it's the Chinese, everyone knows it's not the Russians and the Chinese. Like, everyone knows that. It's just a ridiculous thing even to guess. I mean, the reason that they say what they do, I think we can all figure this out. It's purely political. It has nothing to do with science. I'm talking about TTSA and the Navy. They have their reasons for pretending that they don't know what these things are. Because, look, this is still a very difficult subject, and they're all afraid to state the obvious, which is that these things don't come from our society. They don't come from our civilization. And whether they're extraterrestrial or interdimensional, that's secondary. The fact is they're not ours, and no one is being honest about it. Now, and the journalists are even worse. Like, the mainstream journalists who are covering this, like, let me just say, it's very good that they get some of this information out, okay? The recent, the UAP task force report that Tim McMillan publicized just last week. Yeah, very important stuff. But no journalist doing this is really asking provocative, confrontational, difficult questions. It's as if the U.S. Navy just started to look into UAP a couple of years ago, and that's total BS. The Navy had major encounters with UFOs back in the 40s, and we know this. It's historical record. And so to think that the U.S. Armed Services and the national security state have been spinning their wheels on this for 75 years and come to no conclusions, no theory, no continuity of study. You're going to tell me where you lose pilots during these UFO encounters and have the shit scared out of you with some of these overflights that have occurred over many decades, that they don't have a continuous program to study this? That's ridiculous. And everyone who's looked into this realizes it. And yet our ultra lamestream media just lets this slide.
Well,
because
they've never wanted the story.
No, and they don't know how to handle the story because they're not educated on it. And so they're allowing themselves to be led by the government, by the military on this, and they're really not going places where they need to. And people like us are talking, but what unfortunately has happened in the last decade is that alternative independent media has been pushed further and further to the fringe. We've seen the consolidation of big tech in with the intelligence community and let's call it the deep state, and that's a reality. And they have bludgeoned people with propaganda and ideology for the last decade, and they have pushed alternative views to the side increasingly. So we can talk all we want till we're blue in the face, and we can have all the truth on our side, but we're, at least at this moment, not getting we're not getting access, to the power players, and they are insistent on dumbing this conversation down. So the rest of us just have to have more intelligent conversations than that.
Speaking of the media, the one thing that I've noticed as being a former media guy is, and this isn't an insult to the gentleman who I'm going to mention, but you know what? I'm sick and tired of seeing the big five, which is Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon, David Fravor, Nick Pope, and his horrific hair, terrible hair, and Harry Reid. Okay? Harry Reid. I'm tired of seeing those five. The message, God bless him, has not changed at all. And like I said on Grant Cameron's panel a couple of months ago, and Bob, you were there, I don't see the media coming after that counterpoint, which is and I said this on the panel, I said, where's Grant Cameron? Where's Richard Dolan? Where's people like Linda Moulton Howe or Melinda Leslie? There are brilliant people in this field. We're not that hard to research, yet the entire narrative seems to be controlled by one entity right now, and whatever they want to put out, they get airtime for, and the media just drops the ball. It's been very frustrating for me as a former journalist in the mainstream to actually watch this happen.
I think it's always been that way. I mean, you think of a publication like the New York Times, which has always been very tightly controlled in terms of editorial content and what's allowed to be said there. I mean, people like myself or Linda, Grant, we're all likely to go off script. Like, that's just the reality. I've had a number of instances where I have been on mainstream media and I don't get invited back for that very reason. I don't stay on script. And what is script, by the way? Here's what script is. No cover up, no conspiracy. That's what script is. And so when you go into actually dealing with deep cover up, long-standing cover up, then you're talking actual conspiracy. And that is the verboten place to go. So, I'm friends with a lot of the people you mentioned, like Nick. I've known Nick Pope for a long time, but these are not people who are ever publicly going to say, yeah, there's a conspiracy and a cover-up. They do the exact opposite, and that is why they are able to have the mainstream connection that they have, because they know either they believe it, they genuinely may believe it. Maybe Nick does believe that. And that's why he's congenial to them. And I'm not even saying this to demean Nick, again, because I like and respect him, but that's, I think, his position. But for me, that's not my position. And if I were to say, yeah, there's been a 70-plus year cover-up that is involved illegal and criminal behavior on the part of our government, and it goes on to this day. And by the way, they've got technology and bodies that they're studying in deep secrecy. And here's the evidence for that. Like, they're not ready for that. And so I can just assume that those of us who have that opinion are just not going to be part of that conversation. We're going to be in a different conversation.
I want to get your opinion on something, Richard, before we have to go to break. So the Navy's all in. They've got commanders, aviators, the Office of Naval Intelligence, and the Chief of Naval Operations. They're all in on having something to go. Why is the Air Force silent?
The Air Force has always been silent. I think one reason they might be silent now, though, is because they took a hell of a beating over Project Blue Book. And I know that sounds like ancient history, but and the other thing is that the Navy and the Air Force, I mean, yes, they're under unified command, but there's definitely rivalry there. There's always been rivalry. There's always been a sense of distinction between the two services. And what I suspect that's going on in the Navy, and I don't know this, I'm only suspecting, is that there's been a power struggle on this matter of UAP that hasn't taken place in the Air Force. And I think, what you're seeing, the information that's come out now, I think has come out because there's a faction within the Navy and people connected to it that believe in this. There's also a faction in the Navy that I'm sure does not believe in openness on this subject. And I suspect that this faction hasn't developed as strongly in the Air Force, and we're probably, for that reason, not seeing it. I think it's just happened in the Navy. And the Navy is where a lot of action is. 70+% of the world is covered by ocean, and we all tend to overlook the UAP sightings that occur over and in large bodies of water. There's a lot of it because it's just so remote from us. We're not aware.
Gentlemen, I'm going to get you to hold on right there because we are going to go to break here at the bottom of the hour. An amazing show tonight on Science Bob and Friends with Science Bob McGwier, the legendary Richard Dolan, and we continue this great conversation on UFOs, cover-ups, and much more on Spaced Out Radio next. All right, gentlemen, we're clear.
I'm going to ask Bob a question.
Yeah.
Sure.
Why do you think the Air Force has held back on this? You probably have a theory.
I believe that, and we all believe that the real shitstorm and secrecy started in 1947. And the Army Air Force got control, and then they evolved into the United States Air Force under Truman.
Right.
And they just they acted very, very, very toughly, illegally, maybe according to some people, in keeping stuff secret. And so if all the crap comes out about all the bad they did, it's the Navy that'll take the black eye. I mean, the Air Force.
The Air Force,
black eye. The Navy. A lot of people don't know that the Navy has the largest Air Force for the United States. They're bigger than the United States Air Force, because of the number of aviators and airplanes. Yeah, it's bigger.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just think the Air Force has a lot of history they don't want to come out.
Well, along those lines, first of all, the Air Force pissed off the Navy again and again during the 40s and 50s with how they handled UFO sightings by Navy personnel.
Yes.
That's an old story. And then the other thing about the Navy is that when you look at like an organization like NICAP, when Kehoe was running it back in the 50s, there were a lot of Navy guys there. I mean, one of Kehoe's top guys was Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter, of course. He was not just a director of the CIA, but was an admiral. There was an Admiral Delmer Farney, who was very big on this subject in the 1950s. And quite a few other Navy commanders and admirals who were deeply engaged in the UFO problem back in the 50s. And I don't think that ever stopped. I think that the Navy, in my own personal life, I've had some interesting conversations with Air Force people about UFOs, but generally I find them to be much more tight-lipped. The Navy guys and a couple of Navy women, mostly men, have some unbelievable stories that I've been told just off the record. So I think that this is something that I suspect has a personal impact on Navy people, even more than on Air Force people. And I wonder if that's part of it.
Could be, because when you come near a naval asset, there's typically lots of people on it.
Explain what you mean by that. I'm not sure.
Aircraft carriers and ships, they're little cities.
Oh, yes, exactly. Right.
And so they reinforce the story amongst each other. And I got to tell you, Lieutenant Ryan Graves and his commanding officer, they've been very open that they are not happy with these near mid-air collisions and no investigation.
No, his story is amazing. He's was he on the Chesapeake? That was the Eastern Coast.
Yeah, with the Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah, the Teddy. Thank you. Yeah, he had a cube-shaped object with a sphere inside of it, like fly between their aircraft.
It was. I think it's the other way around. There was a cube-shaped object surrounded by what looked like a spherical force field or something like that.
Did I get that mixed up? Okay.
I believe I have it right.
Okay. I'll read the article again. But in any case, it's a bizarre thing, and no one could explain it, and it flew between two F-18s, so that's ridiculous.
Yep.
And they should be ticked off about that. But look, I think we can all realize this is not some kind of black budget classified testing program. Like, that's absolutely, like, you don't do that to these guys.
No, and Chris Mellon.
But you're testing advanced aircraft.
Chris Mellon was on the oversight committee for SAPs in the Pentagon when he was DASDI.
Yeah, but not during that encounter, was he?
He was not during that encounter, but but any black budget programs that may have produced that encounter, he would have known about, because it would have been going on for years.
1 minute, guys.
There's some disagreement about that as a possibility. I think, when you look at the Eric Davis, Thomas Wilson notes, that some of the review might have gone even a little bit higher than just committee members, is my opinion.
All right, we got just under over 30 seconds. Richard, quick question for you. Two questions. Number one, what's your opinion of eating breakfast foods for dinner?
Not a fan, but to each his own.
Yes, thank you. 1 for 1. Number 2.
Breakfast foods would be, let's just say, either bowl of cereal or some scrambled eggs.
Exactly.
Or bowl of oatmeal.
Yeah, exactly.
I could see doing oatmeal, maybe even throw an egg on it too, but that's just not something I do.
All right, we'll hit you up with the next one at the next half hour. All right. Here we go, guys. 5 seconds. Very thankful to find out that Richard Dolan does not eat breakfast for dinner. Makes me a happy man here. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for tuning in to Spaced Out Radio tonight. We appreciate each and every one of you listening on in. We want to remind you that if you have missed most of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. We continue on with Science Bob and friends. Bob McGwier is the lead scientist in Spaced Out Radio land right now, and our special guest, Mr. Richard Dolan. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Thank you, Dave.
Yes. Richard, you made me happy with the whole breakfast conversation. You did.
Very good. I'm very engaged in the foods that I eat, cooking. I like to cook. I like to do my food prep. And so, no, I don't think I would have a problem eating breakfast foods at night sometimes. On rare occasions, I'll break out I don't usually do cereal anymore, but sometimes I might do that in the middle of the day. But that's quite rare.
All right.
Okay.
Science Bob, shoot it.
Let's get into some good stuff. We've listened to some history, some reasons for thinking we've been visited, and some discussion about the different types of whatever they are that are visiting us. Why are they abducting us?
Yeah. Well, I think there's one group that is abducting people, and that's gray aliens. And if you subscribe to Jacob's theory on this, and he may be right, actually, is that the gray aliens are actually working for the insectolins, as he calls them, or the mantid type beings, the big bug-eyed. His opinion is that they're actually running the show, and that they may have actually created at least the small grays as kind of biological genetic creations that work for them. That may be true. But in terms of abductions, it only seems to be the grays. There are other visitations by other beings, but in terms of like taking someone to a craft and doing things to that person, putting in implants, basically implants and reproductive stuff like that seems to be gray aliens doing that. So we have to ask, why are gray aliens doing that? And again, I'm going to go back to Jacobs here and the late Bud Hopkins and John Mack and all the other abduction researchers, from Barbara Lamb to Yvonne Smith. Like, they're all in agreement here, which is that they are creating hybrid humans. They're creating alien hybrids, part alien, part human. And the only disagreement that you find is the interpretation of that. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? But all of these abduction researchers have made the same conclusion, is that gray aliens are taking people, they are taking their genetic material, and they are creating hybrids that look human. Now, there are some variations of this idea. Someone like Jacobs, he will argue that they're doing this without the consent and knowledge of the person, right? And so they're taking them and they remove the embryo at a certain time, and they raise some of them on a ship. In fact, they raise all of them on a ship, and then later insert them into human society if they look close enough to pass. There are some abduction research, like when I was talking with Barbara Lamb about this a year or more ago, there's definitely a belief that hybrids are being raised among us, and they don't know that they're hybrids. And I don't really know what the truth is on this, but there's definitely an attempt going on, it seems to me, to create human beings that have some of their genetic material. Now, that's a weird thing to say because you would think that that would be detectable by our science, but it probably isn't detectable, at least not yet, and it may not be detectable for at least a few more decades, by which time it may not matter. So, you know, and Jacob's thing, and I'm referring to David here again and again because he's really done the most theorizing on this of anyone that I know, which is that he believes that there's an infiltration process going on by which these hybrids look just like us, but they're not like us, and they're somewhat sociopathic, the way he describes them, but they have the ability to influence our mind when they get close enough to us. Now, how that would translate into a global takeover, which is what he talks about, really never made sense to me. I have to honestly just say that. He's talking about the great changeover, the great change, and his interpretation. This is what apparently these hybrids are telling their abductees. There's going to be a great change. And his interpretation is that means planetary takeover. I don't interpret it that way. I interpret the great change as this transformation that we were talking about earlier, moving into the next stage of humanity, this transhuman stage. And I think that they're here for the ride, and they're here to watch it. But in terms of abductions, well, one thing that I could definitely say, because I have a couple of abduction stories in the book, which among other people include my wife Tracy, who consented to having her stories put in there. And there weren't abductions where she was taken on a craft, but they were encounters. I think some of these abductions involve implants into the brain for monitoring operation and maybe something more, maybe control. I think you have to consider that. Even the implants that are not in the brain, like a lot of them seem to be connected to the nervous system by which they can influence the brain. So that's something that I think we have to really consider, which is that how many people have implants in them that aren't even aware, and you know, where that all might lead us. I don't know. I don't have a full answer, Bob, as far as, you know, why we're being abducted. I think we're being abducted. I don't think we can deny it at this point. There's just too many of these stories that have come from too many different people, and I don't think this is confabulation. So something's going on. It involves creation of hybrids. It's all covert, and it involves the implantation of implants. And that's about all I can say about it right now. I don't know why. I mean, I don't know for sure why.
Okay, so Jacobs, I think, is the source of most of my angst, and that's supported for me personally by the many people that you hear being that claim they're being abducted, and I believe them, that something's happening to them, that they're being experimented on genetically, and they're forced to carry fetuses, and right. That's pretty brutal.
Yes, it is, and I don't support that at all. But I don't think it's any more brutal than what we do to other species on this planet. I think it's a lot less brutal actually than what we do. So, and I'm not here to give us all guilt trips, but that's just the reality. Like we do far worse than what we're accusing them of doing. So, let he who's without sin cast the first stone.
You're absolutely. So you mentioned Tracy, and since you mentioned it, I would like to bring it up because I'm sure our listeners would like to know as much as you are comfortable sharing about Tracy's experiences.
Well, anything I wrote about, I think she's fine with it because it's in print now. There were 2 encounters that we included of hers. She wasn't the only person who had multiple encounters included in that book, but she was one of the few. And you know, I was able to do it because I know her as well as I do, and I know the stories, and she's talked to me about them enough that I know them quite well. One, I think the key one is the one that she has the most experience talking about herself has to do with what she calls the hooded being. And this was an event that took place when she was living in Vancouver, actually. She was visiting a good friend of hers in Seattle, a woman, and they were at this person's home watching television. Still daytime. They not drinking, no drugs. They were fully conscious. And both of these women saw between them and the television set a 7-foot tall hooded being appear. And the way Tracy describes it, the main thing that she saw was the being go away. Like in other words, her consciousness registered that this being had just been there for like a second. And she was riveted. She saw it. She looked over at her friend who was frozen. And she called her name really loudly to get her attention. And the thing is that when Tracy was like coming to the realization that she had just seen this tall being, there was this thought that was penetrating her mind. And the thought was, you're just seeing a projection of the TV. That's just a projection of the TV. And part of her is thinking, no, it wasn't a projection of the TV, but I'm being told that. And when she called her friend, the first thing her friend said was, oh my God, I thought that was a projection of the TV. It was like this crazy, freaky moment where they both were having the same thought enter their mind. And then, so after that, they talked about it, and they both were like, yes, we both saw this thing. It was like standing right there. And then it was gone. And then something very strange but very common happened in the aftermath of that, which is that they both completely forgot about it for years. And you hear this all the time with abductees or experiencers or just UFO witnesses. It's uncanny, but it happens frequently. Like the most significant, crazy thing that you could ever experience, and you just forget about it. Yes, people do.
You know what?
Dave's nodding.
Rich, I've actually had that happen. I woke up one night with 2 4-inch cat-like scratches on my back. They're about an inch apart.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife says to me, what happened there? And I'm like, I have no idea. And you know how with cats, they kind of stutter scratch? That's what it looked like. We didn't have a cat at that time.
Uh-huh.
All right. So I think I said to her, we got to get
How do you get scratches like that in the middle of the night?
Exactly. So I said, I got to take a picture of this. Completely forgot. A moment later, completely forgot. 4 hours later, remember, walk back to my bathroom, take my shirt off, and the scratches are gone. Completely gone. No scarring, no nothing. They are gone. I call my wife
After what period of time was this?
4 hours.
Wow.
I call my wife in to the bathroom, and I said, look at this. And she forgot. She goes, what? I said, my back? And she goes, what about it? I said, the scratches that were on there earlier that you saw? And then she looks down. She goes, where'd they go? Like there was no scarring, no redness, nothing. Like nothing ever happened.
How bizarre.
Yeah.
But then that happens so frequently.
It's weird.
It's as if I really believe that these beings have the ability to manipulate our cognitive capabilities. Like they can manage our memory, as it were. They can, and we've got our own technology. Like the military's got its own, frequencies that can prevent you from thinking clearly. That can incite terror and fear, and all other types of emotional reactions. So I can only assume that these other beings are quite advanced with that as well.
Oh, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible when you have something like that happen. With the experiencers, this is one thing that I have noticed over the last couple of years. They have all of a sudden become the forgotten souls of ufology, is the way I like to put it dramatically, because of everything that is going on. Why have we forgotten about these experiences? And are we worse off for not paying attention to them because we are grinding so hard for actual proof?
Well, I'm glad you're really asking great questions. I think the reason that the experiencers, at least for right now, have been sort of left behind is because of what we were talking about. Was it during the break or during the show about how the mainstream media is covering this in such a timid, tepid, controlled way? They don't want to talk about conspiracies. They don't want to talk about cover-ups, and they don't want to talk about abductions. They don't want to talk about people's direct experiences with these beings. That's a bridge too far for them. That is way too uncomfortable for them, for their narrative. So experiencers, I mean, that is where the rubber meets the road, is when people are having these direct experiences with these beings. It doesn't get any more real than that. And we need to understand that to the best extent possible. And we're at a disadvantage because, for people who've had these experiences, it's very obvious that they've been subject to some form of cognitive control to a greater or lesser extent, but usually to some extent. So it's difficult to know exactly what happened, but we need to investigate and find out. So I think, I can understand, like, if you've got a group of people that really want to have disclosure of UFOs, I've come to realize, like, maybe it's best to go with these baby steps, which is what they're doing, because honestly, those of us who study UFOs and live in this reality, we're used to it, but we can easily forget just how revolutionary and crazy this would be for the rest of the world. And so to throw everything out at just ordinary people who know nothing about this, that's a mind job and a half. So it's not difficult to see why you would want to do this through stages. And we're definitely not at the stage of, we're not even at the stage of the Navy admitting that, that they have an idea of what these UAP are. Like, they're pretending that they don't know. So we're not even there. We're just at the most baby of baby steps. But I think your point is really a good one, Dave.
A little bit of a change on topic here before I pass it over to Bob again. Richard, there's a lot of people, myself included, who believe that any sort of disclosure today on this planet, that aliens are here, everything is happening, we are not alone in the universe, that it could literally collapse the economies of a lot of countries on this planet. Are you in agreement with that if aliens arrive, that economically this could be absolutely disastrous, almost apocalyptic?
Mm-hmm. 10 years ago, and even more than that, but 10 years ago when we wrote AD After Disclosure, that was exactly what I said. And I said it primarily because of the transformation of the energy paradigm that would probably take place. Global financial systems dependent, especially then, but still now, on maintenance of what's called the petrodollar system. That's the U.S. basically throwing its military weight around the world to enforce other nations to buy their oil in dollars. And that is what keeps the United States in its profligate spending ways and allows the United States to be the dog that can pee on everyone's tree, is keeping that system in place. And a new energy paradigm would very much threaten that whole system. And it would, even under the best of conditions, like, you can see that in the long run, knowledge of this reality is probably necessary for us. If we're going to get to whatever stage of maturity that we want to get to, we have to confront this and understand this reality. But in the short term and in the medium term, it's going to be hell to pay. There's going to be a lot of disruption. Now, the reality is, we're looking at the economic financial disruption that you're talking about, we're probably going to see in the springtime of this next year. There's only so many trillions of dollars that governments can just create out of thin air before you're going to start seeing some serious repercussions. We're already seeing them now, but I think we're going to be looking at more. We're clearly looking at a global digital currency reset of some way. And, I can imagine people losing a lot of savings in that whole transition. There's going to be a lot of very difficult financial times ahead in the coming year. I don't know if there'll be less or more than what disclosure would have brought, but we're already looking at a kind of meltdown and rebuilding. I mean, they talk about the Great Reset. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's right out of Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. So we are in the process of something virtually as dramatic as a disclosure of UFOs in terms of our global system that we're looking at right now. Wow. I think.
Yep, I'm quite a bit worried that the last 2 decades has been a little rough on the long-term prospects for us maintaining the current system for economy. I really do. So a lot of people don't know history that the United States at the end of World War II at Bretton Woods guaranteed the world that our Navy would keep the oceans open because almost all the world's commerce passes over the ocean. So the Navy has a serious issue. A lot of people don't know that history.
That's a great point. Yeah, very few people know about Bretton Woods, of course. That's what created the world financial system after World War II. And that's where the U.S. dollar was pegged to gold at $35 an ounce. Gold's price was rock solid. The dollar, you could actually take gold and trade it in for dollars and take your dollar and get gold. Like it was anywhere in the world until 1971, until Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. And the reason, of course, is that the U.S. was creating too many dollars, and gold became really cheap to buy. And there was a run of gold out of Fort Knox, out of the United States, to the rest of the world. The U.S. was hemorrhaging gold in the late 60s because of Vietnam and probably social spending. But and so Nixon put a stop to that. But the problem with that is that it would have then there would have been no reason for nations to hold dollars, and there would have been the U.S. economy would have been flooded with dollars, and it would have caused probably a hyperinflation. That was prevented by Henry Kissinger going to Saudi Arabia and striking a deal to create the petrodollar system, by which they created OPEC and forced all the world's nations to buy their oil in dollars. So we got rid of the gold standard, but we got the oil standard instead, and that's what's kept the U.S. on its path ever since. But that is now breaking down. I think it's very obvious. You can see this system is breaking down. So where we're going to head as a result.
It is, and it seems like data is the new standard. But you need data to run machine learning and artificial intelligence, and data is like the #1 commodity. I think it's more valuable than oil.
Actually, yeah, I think that's true. When you think about smart technology, smart devices, that is spying devices, all of that data is being fed. And actually what it's going to do is it's going to feed artificially intelligent algorithms. This is how you're going to get to the singularity, is with 5G and smart tech and smart devices. But yeah, the data itself, I think you're right, Bob, is incredibly valuable. How to commodify and monetize that is a question beyond my pay grade, but I think that's what we're seeing. Like, we're seeing all of that data become commodified and monetized and digitized. And the other thing is, I'm no expert here, but I think we're going to be seeing a real battle between cryptocurrencies and central bank digital currencies. And how that's going to end up, I have no idea.
Dave?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how people react to this, because if these extraterrestrials do come down and announce themselves, or even if and we got to get to this next half hour, what Hamish Shed had stated, that this Galactic Federation is holding off aliens, we have to wonder how that is going to play out if all of a sudden the switch is flipped. We do. I mean, there's still a lot of people out there. I mean, not to harm any religion or say anything bad about that, but more than half of this world's population is still under some sort of religious and believing in a lot of religious text. And you just can't throw that out, because those beliefs still believe that anything that falls from the skies is demonic, and it's scary. So
yeah, that's right. I mean, one of the things that we're going to have to come to terms with, and again, I'm very proud that we wrote about this 10 years ago, is even if there were like a gray alien on a podium next to the president, like, people would never agree on the intentions of these things.
Absolutely. Richard, I'm going to get you to hold on. Science Bob, you hold on as well. 2 hours down. We have Science Bob and Richard Dolan for another 30 minutes. Then we'll bring in the SOR Newswire and the Thought of the Day. Hour 3 of Spaced Out Radio is next. All right, gentlemen, we are clear.
That's why we went later. When I asked Bob how late we were going, he said 1:30, but you're on a different time zone, aren't you, Bob?
Indeed, I'm on Central.
You bastard.
But you're having fun.
Why.
You're having fun.
I'm on Eastern time, dudes. It's already 2 a.m. here.
Oh, dear.
Can you push it?
Well, look, I kept saying SOR, SOR, and he said, I can't find SOR because I just use SOR, but like every geek, I use acronyms.
Yeah, that's all right. I am tired AF, but we're going to do this for one more half hour.
Yep. And we're going through the meat part of the book now.
Yeah, this is actually a lot of fun. I mean, I'm gratified that you've read this book closely enough, Bob.
Oh, I've read it twice before I did this interview. Wow. But look, so I figured out this was the right way to do it, interviewing Fugel and John Alexander. It took me a month to read all of his books.
Well, I'm a better writer than Alexander, so there you go.
Oh my God, yes. You're definitely a better writer. He just has a lifetime of really interesting experiences.
You know, it's funny. I should talk with him sometime. We have not been on friendly terms for almost a decade now. We really had it out.
Oh, did you have it out? Oh, when he said there was no UFOs in the government.
Yeah, well, we had a debate in 2011. I was sick as a dog during that debate. The room was actually spinning, but I still handled him quite sufficiently, I would say. Leslie Kane moderated that, and she openly sided with Alexander. It's like, you're not being much of a moderator here, Leslie. But yeah, the argument was, is there a UFO cover-up? He said no, and I said yes. And I just thought, this is a ridiculous argument that you're taking. But it's actually the argument that you're hearing in the mainstream now. It's like, no cover-up. We don't know what these things are. It's like, that's total BS. But anyway, ever since then, I think we've never communicated. So
that's too bad. I'm sure you guys have stuff. So he reached out to me right after I went and visited Chris Bledsoe.
Yeah, no surprise.
Yep. Then that apparently is common modus operandi.
Well, I mean, you know, what's happening with Chris is everything about that is what Alexander has been deeply engaged in for a long time. I mean, and that's well known about him. So he would clearly be interested in what happens with Chris Bledsoe. Yes, exactly. And before that, you know, the one that no one wants to talk about was Stan Romanek, though his case, Alexander was very much, a lot of people were, but I think they stopped being believers, a lot of them, after the pencil incident. Yeah, but do you believe he was framed with these child things or child? No idea. You believe he was framed or not? Not a clue. Yeah, I don't know either, because I'm new to all this. And again, you know, it was you that goaded me on through your interview to go and meet Chris Bledsoe. Yeah. And you already know, it's just totally changed my life. The thing, Chris, you know, I've spoken with him a number of times now. I did a series of interviews with him, and I genuinely really, really like him. But there's things about the story that still I have to say, and I said this to him, I still struggle with. The encounter with the being that's like the Virgin Mary. Like, I just don't know what to make of that. There's a lot of encounters historically of Virgin Mary cases, and a lot of them I've been reading over lately. And I'm just going to honestly say I don't find many of them credible. I'm not saying that they're all non-credible, but I'm saying to me, when I read them, I don't know that I believe them. I'm talking about a lot of 19th century encounters that I've just recently gone through again. And I don't know what I think. I'm not challenging him on this. No, but look. I mean, look at it this way. Telepathy is a large part of every one of these abductions or interactions, and screen memories, etc., are involved. And it would be easy to manipulate people if you have that capability. Right. So, in other words, create an illusion of something that you want them to see.
Yeah.
And we know, like, I mean, this is what gray aliens can do, and other aliens, like, they can create physical illusions, at least if we take the accounts seriously. So that's the one thing that I keep coming back to. It's like they may have created this illusion that, you know, accords with someone's predisposition. Yeah, yep. Possible.
Seems interesting.
We have just over a minute, guys.
Okay.
Yeah, and when we get to break,
hour, then we're done.
Yeah, half hour, we're done. Just hold on till we get to break, and then we'll say a proper good night to you gentlemen during the break.
And apologize to Tracy for me.
And me.
No problem.
And me.
No problem. This has been fun. I've actually I've really enjoyed this with you guys.
Oh, thank you.
I've enjoyed it.
We've had a good time with you too, my friend.
Thank you.
All right.
I feel so lucky. Like I get to talk about stuff that I'm interested in, and I can get people to listen to it. Like, how lucky is that? I feel very, very fortunate.
Yep. You're a good writer. You have a gift for explaining what you've written.
That's really it. There's better researchers out there that are more knowledgeable, but I was blessed with a good memory, and I like to speculate and hypothesize, and however it turned out, I'm good at remembering and organizing facts.
All right, gentlemen, hold on right there because we're going to go live back in 5 seconds here.
Good. Great.
If you'd like to connect with us, head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio is underway tonight. Thank you so much for being with us. Really do appreciate earning your listening ears. We welcome back everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on KPNL, TalkStream Live, and Revolution Radio. All of our archives are free by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Palasthesia. Palasthesia is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. For the final time tonight on Science Bob and Friends, we introduce our resident scientist, Bob McGwier, along with the legendary Richard Dolan, as we get into UFOs and everything about this amazing topic tonight. Richard, I'm going to kick things off here because a gentleman out of Israel named Hume has really stirred up some controversy in the UFO and political worlds in the last 48 hours. What's your thoughts on this man who used to run a space security for Israel, who is now saying that there is a galactic federation that is controlling whether or not ETs come to Earth?
Yeah. It's a fascinating story. In fact, I did a YouTube program last night, and I looked in some comments, and people wanted me to talk about it last night, and I almost did, and I guess I just didn't. Yeah, his name is Hume, and he's 87 years old. He's had a very impressive career with the Israeli government, and he was with the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF Intelligence Division. He ran some element of their space or satellite program. Like, he's had a very, very successful career. He's now 87, and he makes this statement, like, the UFOs have asked us not to say that they're here because humanity isn't ready. Like, that's the thing. He said something like Trump was going to reveal this, which I thought was kind of interesting. But he said that the aliens in the Galactic Federation are like, no. Let me look for the quote here. Let people calm down first, they said. And he goes on and says they don't want to start mass hysteria. So, like, some of the reactions, most of the reactions in the media are like, this man's lost it. He had a great career, but he's lost his marbles. And I think it's fair to say that anyone who's in the UFO community reading this is like, yep, he sounds just like a lot of people in the UFO field. And how he got his information, I don't know. And, I've never known anything about him until 2 days ago, but it doesn't sound crazy. I mean, these are unprovable assertions. He talked about an underground base in Mars, and like an agreement between the U.S. government and aliens. Where is he getting it? Is he getting it from his intelligence sources, or is he getting it from a combination of intelligence people and what he's just researched on his own? Because he's obviously into this. Like a lot of people in the intelligence community are into the UFO subject, and they become very active students of it. So I don't know, but I mean, people can lose it when they get into their late 80s. It does happen. Like, we just have to be aware of that. It can happen. But he doesn't seem like he's crazy. Like the quotes that we have here in the news doesn't strike me that he's lost his mind. I think he's just, honestly, I think he's giving his honest opinion as best he knows it, because he's 87. He just doesn't give a crap anymore. That's what it sounds like to me.
It does sound strange, but it certainly is news. Let's go back to the book for just a little bit, Richard, because we've covered well, I think, your view of history, your view of who the people who are doing investigation, including yourself, conclude are coming here. We haven't gone far enough yet into why are they here. So let's delve into some of their agendas, and also go through your arguments, because I think they're interesting, for maintaining secrecy by them.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, I don't even have a hard copy of my own book. I've got the digital copy here. So for me to go through that, it might be a little tricky, but I can remember it pretty well. And you can maybe remind me of some things.
Sure.
What I think is that, so why they're here. So I think I stated pretty clearly, in my opinion, earlier, why I think they're here. I think they're here because of us, because of where we are. So our particular development at this point in time has prompted, in my opinion, a lot of interest by them. Because what we are doing right now is important. I always laugh when I hear people say, oh, why could they possibly care? We must be like insects compared with them. And that's not true. It's absolutely not true. We have nuclear power. We have bombs. We detonated 2,000 nuclear bombs on this planet between 1945 and 2000. And that's quite significant. That's a significant power. And the powers that we're developing are going to be even greater than that. So no, we're not insignificant anymore. So that's going to get their attention. What I believe is that the group of the Greys, okay, if there's one group that I'd have to be concerned about, it's them. And I'm not 100% certain that they are here to subvert us and to dominate us, and to subjugate us. But I think that's absolutely possible. I think it's possible that they have decided they want to control our society to the extent that's possible, whether that's through hybrids or through creating their own versions of avatars. One person that you, Bob, and I both know, who's a member of my site, has been a very active proponent of that idea. And it's not a bad idea. It's not the worst idea I've ever heard. That is, if they have the ability of something as arcane as soul manipulation, like if you believe in a soul, and if you believe that a soul can be extracted and placed into a container, which we've heard this in our field over many, many years, if that is possible, could they, this is getting into some far out stuff, and I don't know if I believe it, but could they put their soul in human bodies? And if they do that, basically their own little version of invasion of the body snatchers. I don't know what I think about that, because I don't know how to prove or disprove such a theory. But my point simply is, it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be hybrids. It could be something, some other method of control by which they leverage power in our world Maybe they just bribe people. Maybe they control people, but I think it's in their interest to manage our transition. And so that's one thing. Now, is there a galactic federation? We hear this all the time, and I will fully admit, like, I used to just laugh off those types of statements when I would hear them. Basically, when you go to California, you hear it all the time at UFO conferences. There's a galactic federation of light. They're here to help us ascend to the next density, the next level. They're the ascended masters, and you hear this all the time, particularly out on the West Coast, but sometimes out in the East where I live. And I've always really looked down on that type of thinking because it doesn't strike me as very logical or scientific, and it's based on very subjective experience. But maybe it's true. Maybe there's a good group of beings that is actually trying very hard to bring humanity to what they see as a more advanced and spiritual level of existence. And look, I would have to agree with at least one element of that theory, which is that if we continue as violent as we are, as irrational as we are, as controlled by really, truly evil powers at the top of our power pyramid, and we get violent, powerful technologies that take us out beyond our planet, that's going to be a problem. So we can't. If there is a galactic community of some sort, like my feeling is like it's not difficult to see why they would be concerned about us. So there might be a group or groups that are like, okay, let's see if we can help these humans. Now, how they would be helping us by going to a very select number of people who meditate, who claim that they get downloads, or claim that they communicate with these other beings. How that's going to do it is beyond me. That seems to be totally ineffective as a way of achieving a better civilization, a more peaceful one. But there could be groups out there that are trying to help us, and there could be groups out there that just don't give a crap about us, and they just don't want us to rock the boat. So that's what I think is going on.
So Lou Baldwin, of course, is our author I've read a lot about recently, and he is really into this soul download, and when they're done, the soul leaves and they go find another body or assign one, and that humanity and Earth is a prison planet, and we just don't remember our past, and when we die, we go back. It is interesting. So look, it's as we it becomes cybernetic organisms. That is, we marry our technology to our bodies for all sorts of reasons.
Right.
That gives a major control surface for the whatever is here to interface and or control large aspects of our lives. So let's talk about aliens and humans in the transhumanist era, which is the major last thing in your book.
That's why I look at us as becoming one big anthill. That's the expression I use, because, if you get like Elon Musk's idea of the Neuralink or some variation of that, combined with a kind of or series of AIs that can interface with that, and powerful AIs in the future. You've got utopians like Ray Kurzweil who's saying, "Oh, it's great, you're going to be like the gods." But that's truly utopian, and it's very dangerous. It's a very dangerous idea because that can so easily be controlled to hack the human mind.
Dave?
Yeah, I have a question. A couple people have asked this in our chat rooms tonight. What did you think, Richard, of Jacques Vallée's comments with Joe Rogan? Did you think he was vague? Did you think he went in detail enough?
I'm embarrassed. I know that Jacques and James Fox did Rogan. I haven't heard the interview yet, so I can't comment.
Okay.
It was pretty he was pretty vague.
All right. Second question that I've got from the audience a couple of times now is in regards to Antarctica. There's all this mystery going on down at the South Pole there. Do you think that has any ties to what is happening with UFOs and a potential alien presence?
Yeah, maybe. Actually, I would say maybe. It took me a long time to come to that because I think there were a number of individuals in the field of UFOs who talked a lot about Antarctica, and I just thought they were completely full of shit. And I didn't really think that I don't know if I can say that word on your show.
No, I'll edit it out. Don't worry.
Sorry. Yeah. But be that as it may, there were individuals who talked a lot about Antarctica, and I just didn't give them any credibility whatsoever. And so, but unfortunately, that caused me to dismiss Antarctica for a little while. But I do think that there are reasons to think that there's something important about Antarctica. I don't say that I know this, but I think it's entirely possible. Yeah. A couple of people that Linda Moulton Howe has talked to struck me as possibly credible, and a number of other things about Antarctica, like Buzz Aldrin's tweet and the fact that John Kerry was down there right before the election of 2016. Like, there are things about Antarctica that really do make me wonder that there's something important going on there, but I don't know. I think it's just possible.
And they spent nearly $1 million medevacing Buzz Aldrin out of there.
Oh, that much?
Oh yeah. Oh, he got ill or whatever down there, and that cost a fortune to medevac him out.
Wow.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah. When Kerry went, there was a bunch of them that went.
He could afford it on his own. We tried to get him to do the forward for after disclosure. He wanted $50,000. I was like, see ya. It's not going to happen. But yeah, anyway, the point about Antarctica, yes, I agree. Like, that's it's interesting to me. I don't know how to get information out of there. I mean, it's so remote. It's so difficult. There are alleged whistleblowers. I don't know what I think about all of these whistleblowers. I think some of them seem credible, and others I really wonder. It's really easy to lay down a line of BS, and it happens more than people want to acknowledge. So I'm not sure.
All right, so let's talk just for a moment, and then Dave can go next. Why? Give us your view of why the visitors might fear us.
Because I don't know that we'll be able to take them in a street fight any time in the near future, but we might be a real nuisance. I mean, we're jumping to a completely new level of intelligence that's going to be governing our society soon. I don't know if we're going to have like a post-singularity world the way like people like Kurzweil and others have envisioned, like that is a godlike intelligence managing our world. It's possible. Like, that is possible. Some kind of runaway AI that is able to tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak and, get to a kind of new organizing level of reality by which it just blows us away. That may or may not happen. Like the architect in the second issue of The Matrix. Remember that no one understood what that guy was talking about. Like, I don't know if we'll ever get to that, but we are going to get to a point where AI or AIs, plural, collectively are going to be in orders of magnitude of intelligence beyond what we're able to manage in our society. Like, I don't think there's any question about that. And it will enable breakthroughs in propulsion, in energy, in weaponry of all sorts. Like, so you just put those together right there in terms of communication, like things that we're not even right now in 2020 able to envision are going to happen because of what strong AI is going to enable us to do. So we're not talking about human society of 2020. Human society of 2050 or 2060 or 2080 is going to be orders of magnitude different than what we're able to do. So that's why they would be having some fear. It's not that we're going to wipe them out. It's like we're going to disrupt something that is important to them. That's what I think.
Richard, I want to ask you a quick question about the To the Stars Academy. All right, because over the last couple of years, people have either loved them or hated them. There's never really been any, moderate love or disdain for them. people have drawn lines in the sand. When their latest budget came out, I mean, their numbers, because they are a publicly traded company, they're not making a lot of money. It looks like they're losing money almost at times hand over fist.
Right.
Do you see in 2021 that we may see a change in the To the Stars Academy, or if their financial resources run dry, that we could see it shut down?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely possible. I'm not in with them. There's a few people in that organization that I communicate with. Right. So I have knowledge to that extent. And I will absolutely say that there's been frustration inside that organization for as long as they probably existed, because they feel like they're just smashing their head into a wall, trying to get the attention of a dead political establishment, of a dead media, brain dead, that doesn't seem to be moving on this. Now there's a little bit of movement now, but yeah, they've struggled. They actually do struggle. And I've believed for the last several years that this organization could just disappear anytime. And when that happens, I've been accused of being like some fanboy for them, and that's absolutely not true. But I'm definitely not a hater. I think the haters are really irrational, illogical, and dangerous about this. And when I hear things like, "Oh, this is a CIA disinformation plot," I think, like, you don't know what you're talking about when you say things like that. I just don't. The fact that they are government people, some of whom have been connected to CIA, yes, okay, but the intelligence community is not monolithic, never was, never will be. The United States national security state is never monolithic. There's always factions. There are always people who have different opinions here. And what is clearly the case is that these guys are a faction. They have friends and they have enemies within that community. They have people who want to help them, and they have people who want to freaking destroy them. And that's just how it is. So now the question is, why are they doing what they do? Well, there's the argument that some of these people just genuinely believe in the cause. I think that's probably the case with at least some of them. Are there ulterior motives? Maybe. One might have been to make money. Maybe they want to make money on bringing out some of the science and technology so that they can get contracts to exploit it. That's possible. Maybe they're seeing dollar signs. But are they trying to do a fake disclosure, which I've heard since the beginning? I just think that's ridiculous. I think that's an absurd idea. But people say it, and the people who say it, in my opinion, don't know anything about UFO history, and they don't know anything about the long-standing, heavy-handed secrecy that the United States government has had on this subject for years and years. So they just have this idea in their head that, like some people will say, because all the aliens are good and we know they're good, so here's TTSA trying to scare the hell out of people by, talking about a threat. And the whole idea is to bump up the military budget for that reason. Well, that's stupid, because that hasn't happened, and you could have predicted that. Like, the military budget isn't higher because of a perceived UFO threat, even though we heard this 3 years ago from some people. Like, that's just a ridiculous, insulting idea. And then the idea that they're trying to scare the hell out of people with an alien invasion, like what Werner von Braun supposedly told Carol Rosin 50 years ago. I just think I see nothing to support that whatsoever. They talk about a threat for a very simple reason. You've got a Congress that will not pay attention to this. So what are they doing? They're shaking people by the shoulder, saying, pay attention. When I wrote 2 volumes of UFOs in the national security state, I sounded exactly the same as these guys.
Right.
What did I do? I talked about military encounters with UFOs that scared the hell out of the national security state.
That's right.
As those encounters should scare the hell out of them. If you're a military that is responsible for national defense, you have to look at this as a potential threat. You would be negligent in your duty if you didn't.
Gentlemen, I got to call it the night right there because we are done for the night. Richard Dolan, Science Bob, thank you for coming on Spaced Out Radio. We have the SOR Newswire and the Thought of the Day coming up next.
Guys.
Richard Dolan, everyone. Science Bob, everyone.
Don't stop. It was great. I really enjoyed. I always enjoy a great conversation, and that's really what this was.
Yeah,
and
that's how
you
we
both
do
were
it.
gracious to let me just yammer on.
Oh,
so.
yeah.
No, but that's how we do it. That's exactly how we've done every one of these so far, and it really seems to work. You just you throw in a little impulse, and you let the person run with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was fun.
All right, gentlemen.
And thanks for letting me plug my book a little bit. That was great.
Not a problem. Thank you, guys. I appreciate both of you for coming on the show, and we will talk to you both very, very soon.
I'm sure. Dave, good seeing you. I love the beard.
Thanks, Rich. You take care.
Good night.
Bob, I'm sure we will catch up at some point soon.
I'm sure I'll talk to you tomorrow. See you.
All right.
All right, guys. Take care.
Good night, everybody. Good night to the people listening.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
That's an A+ show, everyone. We just had an A+ show. I'm happy with that one. Science Bob, awesome. Richard Dolan, awesome. Yeah, we rocked this one. We did. I am happy right now. Very happy. Yeah, that's a good show. That's a good show. We did well there. We all did well. I apologize I couldn't get to enough of your questions out there, but I'm glad in reading the comments that you guys all enjoyed it. And for our new subscribers, this is what we do each and every night for the new people tuning on in. Lee A., thank you for the amazing super chat. Wow. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. This is awesome. Love you, Lee A. Because I don't know how to pronounce your name. Yeah, that was... I'm buzzing over this one. I may be up for a while. You know, this one was as tantalizing as Corrance the booking guy's mustache. It's that tantalizing. Yeah. Richard didn't dive from any questions either. You know, we asked him some pretty straight up questions and he went at it. I love it. There was good honesty here tonight. Good honesty. And we closed strong with Richard saying literally he doesn't expect the TTSA to last in 2021. How's that for a little bit of breaking news? How's that? Thank you, everyone. Thank you. So for our new subscribers, maybe you're just checked it out because you're Richard Dolan fans and you're still listening in. All right, we're here every night, Monday through Friday. Hope we did enough for you to hit that subscribe button and come on back and join us. We got good people in our chat room, brilliant people in our chat room, actually. We have a lot of fun here. We never talk politics. We never talk about what you're getting hammered with in the mainstream every day. It's all about the woo. It's all about UFOs, ghosts, aliens, consciousness, Bigfoot. This is what we do. And thank you for giving us an opportunity to try and earn your listening ears tonight. But we are here Monday through Friday, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, for 3 hours each and every night. Yes. Andrew, what they would have to bring is new videos, new evidence, and I don't think they can get it now. That's my personal opinion. Yeah, we're talking Sasquatch tomorrow on World Bigfoot Video or Radio. Hey, World Bigfoot Radio, do me a favor, put the time on when we're on, so that way everybody here can check it on out. Rounded third. We're heading for home tonight on Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate the opportunity to broadcast to you. Want to remind you that if you've missed most of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including Rocking Out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. Speaking of the news, let's do this thing, shall we? The news is always changing, which is why we bring you the SOR Newswire at the back end of every show, where we get to the weird, the strange, the wacky, and sometimes the explosive. Now, I don't know if you saw that SpaceX Starship SN8 launch today. Well, the prototype took off perfectly, but it didn't land the landing. It's going to have some deductions there. Definitely not a gold medal performance, but a gold medal of awesomeness, as Starship space flight system just took a big step on its path to Mars. The latest Starship prototype, a shiny silver vehicle known as an SN8, launched an epic high-altitude test flight, taking off at 5:45 p.m. Eastern Time from SpaceX's facility near South Texas village of Boca Chica. The goal was to soar about 7.5 miles into the sky, perform some complex aerial maneuvers, including a belly flop like the one the final Starship will perform when coming back to Earth on its operational flights, and then land safely near the launch site. Well, the 165-foot-tall rocket appeared to notch all of these big milestones, except didn't hit the landing. The vehicle hit its mark, but came down too fast, exploding in a dramatic fireball 6 minutes 42 seconds after liftoff. SN8's rapid unplanned disassembly did nothing to dampen the spirits of SpaceX founder and CEO Elon Musk, who was thrilled by the results of today's flight, saying fuel header tank pressure was low during the landing burn, causing touchdown velocity to be high and RUD, but we got all the data we needed. Congrats, SpaceX team. Hell yeah. Mars, here we come, he said in another tweet. Musk was not expecting complete wire-to-wire success, but he had previously given SN8, short for serial number 8, just a 1 in 3 chance of landing in one piece. That's because today's flight was far more complex and demanding than any other Starship prototype test. The previous altitude record was about 500 feet, achieved by 3 different Starship vehicles, the stubby Starhopper, SN5, and SN6. You know what? I love what he's doing. They're not afraid of failure. You notice that about SpaceX? They're not afraid to lose a rocket or two, because what they're doing is they are taking that loss and they are using it for the positive rather than the negative. They know they're going to make the money off of it. So if you lose a couple with nobody involved, this is how we're learning. I love watching this program. I realize some people don't, but I just love it. It has totally reinvigorated me watching this new space race. The French armed forces now have permission to develop augmented soldiers following a report for a military ethics committee. The report, which was released to the public, considers medical treatments, prosthetics, and implants that improve physical, cognitive, perceptive, and psychological capacities and could allow for location tracking or connectivity with weapon systems and other soldiers. Other possible interventions considered by the Armed Forces Ethics Committee include medical treatments to prevent pain, stress, and fatigue, and substances that would improve mental resilience if a soldier was taken prisoner. The committee said that France needs to maintain operational superiority of its armed forces in challenging strategic contexts. Hold on a second here, France. Have you ever won a war? Let's go back the last 500-600 years. What have you won? What are you talking about operational superiority? You've lost every war. Every war. Napoleon couldn't get it done. You didn't get it done in Canada. All right? Even though the lovely Quebecois people are amazing. You didn't get it done in World War I or World War II. You lost and got your butts kicked by the Vietnamese. When have you won a war, France? Anyways, as a result, it is forbidden any modification that would affect a soldier's ability to manage the use of force or affect their sense of humanity. For examples, and further examples of banned modifications include cognitive implants that would affect the exercise of a soldier's free will, or changes that would affect the reintegration into civilian life. Armed Forces Minister Florence Parly said invasive augmentations, such as implants, are not currently part of military plans, but we have to be clear, not everyone has the same scruples as us, and we have to prepare ourselves for such a future. Parly did, however, leave the door open to future changes in policy. It's an opinion which isn't set in stone and will be regularly assessed in the light of future developments. This is scary, actually. That's a scary story. This is Super Soldiers 101. All right, I forewarn you people almost weekly about going into the ocean. And here we have another one, this time off the coast of Hawaii. A surfer was attacked by a shark near Honolulu Bay in Hawaii, forcing the suspension of a surfing competition. 56-year-old man who has not yet been identified was paddling out from the coast of Maui when the accident occurred, stated wildlife officials. It's not an accident. These sharks are hungry. They eat people. No, they should not be destroyed, but they eat people. That is their job. Did you not see Jaws? All right? Jaws is true. It is real. This is why we don't need to go in the ocean. All right? The victim was taken to a nearby hospital where he was admitted for surgery, according to the state wildlife department. It was unclear what the man's condition was or how severe his injuries were. Looking at the size of this bite, I'm sure he may not have a hip anymore or ribs on one side. In the photo of the surfboard, you see the giant chunk that is actually taken out of this thing. The incident prompted officials to suspend the World Surf League's Maui Pro, which began earlier this week. Following the shark incident, the surfer attacked was not taking part in the competition. There will be no competition at the Maui Pro today. Following a shark incident, the World Surf League said on Twitter, the WSL is working with authorities, and our thoughts are with the victim of this incident. The Maui Pro is on hold until further notice. Yeah, how about you just take it and put it, make it one of them fake ones or something like that. How about that? All right? Leave the sharks alone. They'll eat you if you don't. Polar bears can take some cajoling as pen pals. First, you need to find one, then sedate it, and quickly give it the necessary tools before it wakes up. It's an awkward first encounter. How many friendships do you know that start with a tranquilizer dart and admittedly a one-sided correspondence, but they're sending messages daily? Every morning, John Ars, a senior researcher at the Norwegian Polar Institute, receives a batch of emails from several female polar bears in high Arctic. Great, we have Polar Bear Hub now. Polar Bear Hub. Yes, I'll let you get that one. Checking in and letting him know where they are. Hello. Ooh, I'm on the ice over here. It's a nice day for a berg ride. Anyways, it's always nice to start the day that way, he says. Svalbard, a Norwegian archipelago north of the mainland, is an ideal place for ours to study the section of the world's estimated 26,000 remaining polar bears. There are about 300 living in Svalbard year-round, he explains. If you fly for 1 hour, most of the time, you'll find one. Yes. So what they're doing, they're tracking these, and the data is able to send via email a message from the polar bear because it's got a tracker on it. Along with the tracking collar, the Institute weighs bears, takes samples to monitor their health and diet, as well as testing for evidence of pollutants. The collar can also record body temperature, which can tell scientists if a bear has moved inside a den, an indication that the animal is going to give birth. Sea ice loss is also having an impact on where the polar bears are born, says ours. A layer of sea ice on top of the ocean makes it possible for bears to walk long distances. Important areas that they use to go to give birth to cubs are more or less lost because you don't have sea ice on these islands anymore. Bears are now swimming as far as 200 kilometers to reach an island den, he adds, something they did not need to do 20 years ago. Polar bears are optimistic animals, he says, though. It seems that they are quite resistant, and they are doing quite well despite having the fact that they've lost a lot of their habitat. Here's a weird one in Canada. Yeah, Canadian military's counterintelligence branch has been alerted to a right-wing online activities of a BC reservist by a member of the Five Eyes Intelligence Sharing Alliance and the Criminal Intelligence Branch of an Ontario Municipal Police Service. Those warnings are becoming central to the Army's efforts, unsuccessful to date, to kick Eric Migland out of the Canadian Rangers. They are also raising more troubling questions about why Migland was allowed to remain in the Rangers after being identified as an open, fervent supporter of both the Soldiers of Odin, and a white supremacist group with roots in Europe, and the Three Percenters, a survivalist militia that is originating in the United States. Multiple sources with knowledge of the case say the tips led the military's counterintelligence branch with the support of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, otherwise known as CSIS, to investigate Migland and his ex-wife as possible security threats. Now, the news brought to you by CBC on this one is not identifying sources because they were not authorized to publicly discuss the file, the nature of the intelligence shared, or where it came from. Oh, that is weird. Absolutely weird. You know, that's scary. Scary. Bad Canadian. Bad Canadian. Now, you remember that earlier this year at the Super Bowl where we lost Mr. Peanut? Remember that explosion that happened and his car rolled down the embankment? Yeah, well, apparently we have a replacement. And they grow up very fast. Planters mascot, who the brand killed off, angering Twitter, only to bring him back as a baby, again angering Twitter, and then reinventing him as a 21-year-old Peanut Jr., really angering Twitter, is now turning 50 somehow. A magical Frosty X hat seems to be involved, just in case anyone is wondering. And in the even stronger and stranger turn of events, Twitter seems to be okay with the newest edition of the long-running mascot. Meanwhile, the freshly turned 50-year-old, named no other than Bartholomew Richard Fitzgerald Smythe, or simply Bart, is not returning to Twitter to just celebrate. Oh, horrible puns in this story now. Horrible puns. You know it's ruined. Anyways, his new age, because it would seem that Bart is here to share the news of Planter's new holiday merchandise line, which includes an ugly sweater, ornaments, and other Peanuts presents for you to shell out for the legume lover in your life. For those who lost track during this nutty year, Mr. Peanut was originally killed off by Planters ahead of the Super Bowl before being brought back as Baby Nut. In the 11 months since, he's aged 50 years. That's like living with my ex-wife, meaning we can likely expect an octogenarian Mr. Peanut in probably like a week and a half. Once again, must be living with my ex-wife. A dog in southwest Florida who was thrust into the national spotlight when his owner saved him from an alligator attack, has a new job. The Lee County Sheriff's Office posted a video on social media where Sheriff Carmine Marcino officially deputized 4-month-old Gunner as a member of the Department of Deputy Dogs program. Gunner will help the department in its educational programs as well as promoting the program aimed at serving as community lookouts. And you know what? Gunner's owner, Richard Wilbanks, this is the tough dude who jumps into the water, saves his dog by grabbing the alligator and prying the alligator's mouth open, all while holding his cigar in his mouth. That is one bad dude, by the way. You know, he's happy that his little Gunner is getting noticed. Instincts just took over, adrenaline kicked in, and I just went right into the water after the gator and Gunner. Wilbanks' wife, Louise, was inside the house while the incident happened, and she said she was in complete shock when her husband came in and explained what had happened. He had the dog, and he was covered in blood, not the dog. So I was just like, oh my gosh, Louise said. Her husband suffered a few cuts from the teeth of the gator and said the dog only had a small bite and was recuperating just fine. The rescue was caught on camera of the Wildlife Surveillance Project being run by nonprofit F-Stop Foundation in collaboration with the Florida Wildlife Federation. William Freund, president of F-Stop, says that Wilbanks is one of the homeowners who are taking part in the project called Sharing the Landscape. We have this amazing group of homeowners in southwest area of Florida around Estero that are really enjoying living that close to wildlife. Just sometimes gets a little close. But nonetheless, we have no update on that cigar. I want an update on that. A little bit of a sad story here. A manatee previously spotted with a bicycle tire wrapped around its body. That's horrible. That's horrible. Stop polluting. Horrible. Anyways, turned up more than a year later with the tire no longer in place. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission said the manatee with the tire was first seen in Fernanda Beach in October 2019, and the animal migrated to Blue Springs State Park during the winter. The commission said wildlife rescuers made repeated attempts to locate the manatee to remove the tire, but they were unable to find the animal because of the high population of manatees in the park at the time. However, they aren't exactly sure how the manatee escaped the tire, but they theorize a collision between the animal and a boat propeller in February may have cut the tire enough to allow the manatee to swim free. Hopefully so. And finally, sticking in Florida, a good Florida news story. A couple said they are grateful to a Christmas angel who found their bag that contained $250,000 in jewelry. Then they tracked down the people who lost it and found them. Joe Fitzgerald of Pinellas County and his wife, Elif, attended an annual Denim and Diamonds charity event for Hands Across the Bay on Saturday, and they were among the sponsors of the event, so they had a lot to pack up in the night. Fitzgerald said his trunk was full when they left the event, but the couple did not realize that the rear hatch of their vehicle came open during transit, and the bag containing $250,000 worth of jewelry fell onto the road. The couple said they discovered the trunk was open when Elif Fitzgerald checked her phone and discovered she had dozens of missing calls telling her that the bag belonging to her had been found on the road. The couple learned the bag had been found by a kind stranger. He's our Christmas angel, Joe says. Not only found it, he called 911 and made sure we got our jewelry back. That's good citizenship right there. That's the way it's supposed to be. Thought of the Day happens every night at this time, where we ask a question on our Facebook and Twitter pages, then read your responses on the air because we love the audience participation around here. Today's Thought of the Day is as follows. In your opinion, who is the top UFO researcher right now and why? Andrew. I'd say several could be considered top in their areas. For example, Grant Cameron is top in the area of consciousness. Dolan, Richard Dolan, is top in the area of historical evidence. Melinda Leslie is top on the abductions in my labs. Lou Elizondo and company, top in government relations. Haunted history. So many out there who are knowledgeable, so can't make that call. Cherry. Preston Dennett. He is finding information and putting out material unlike I've ever seen. Canadian Joe, the one who gets the least excited about pictures of balloons. I think that's a shot at me. Joseph, seems kind of tricky. There are so many out there with so many different viewpoints. It's hard to say who's right or close to being right, when in all honestly, we barely know anything in the area of solid information to begin with. Jeff, with decades of research from nuts and bolts ufology to the more paranormal aspects, Dr. Jacques Vallée continues to pass the torch of wisdom to humble, significant scholars and UAP researchers. 13 Ballads. R. Keith Andrews took the mantle from Betty and Barney Hill. Chip, it's UAP now, says Tommy. Let's be PC about this, sugar. I guess because I used UFOs and not UAP. I'm sorry. Very sorry. Thank you for the clown tonight, Marty, by the way. Continuing on. Don, none. Their motivations are all monetary. Most of them have never had a real experience. Also, they are focused on the nuts and bolts of the phenomena, which is not realistic to approach it that way. Cheryl Costa then stands up and says, that's BS. Money isn't the driver for many of us. I hear all these people say to me, you should post your work on the internet for free. I ask them if they are willing to mow my lawn for a year for free. The answer is always no. My work has value and I deserve to be compensated for my research. Absolutely, Cheryl. Absolutely. William Houston, for me, it's got to be me. Joe and Ben from UFO Garage, great friends of this show. Joe says it's Ben from UFO Garage because that dude is a scientist. And then we switched it to say, no, Joe, it's you because you got the best beard and hair in ufology. Hands down. Gorgeous. Joe Strelsky, make sure you check him on out. Michael, Grant Cameron for his tireless efforts, detailed research, and prolific dissemination of consciousness-raising information. Jay, I think it really depends because there are great people with different expertise. The person who knows today's Twitter feed backwards and forwards is not going to be the best lab technician. The best lab technician is not going to be a know-it-all in historical cases, etc. Eric Mitchell believes it's Grant Cameron. Davey, Grant Cameron. David, the ones of us that are alien abductees, cuz we were there. Got time for a couple more. David Ross believes it's Chris Rutkowski. Man, we had like 5 comments from 5 different Daves there. And Chris Rutkowski, a no-nonsense investigator with a healthy amount of skepticism. Also Canadian. Bob McGwier, Science Bob, in other words. This is an untouchable question. You're a pot stirrer, Dave. Oh, Science Bob. Thank you to everybody participating in the Thought of the Dave. We'll do it all again tomorrow on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you to Richard Dolan and Science Bob and to Captain Shirk for a great SOR Newswire. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everybody listening in at work, at home, in your cars, wherever you may be. Thank you to everybody participating in our chat rooms on Spreaker, YouTube, LGAB, Revolution Radio, Facebook, the Space Travelers Club at our website, and all the snarkers and snarkats hanging out at hashtag Spaced Out Radio on Twitter. Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your evening with us, because together, my friends, say it with me, we're watching. We own the night, Mr. Bumblefoot. We need a favor. We need you to take us home. Yes, the Woo train has docked for the night. But tomorrow, my friends, we shall ride again. Your seats are always available. Your tickets never expire. And if you want to bring a friend, yes, we've got room for them too. Good night.